Chapter 1083. President, your breakfast is ready. Not long after the two finished talking, a gentle and sweet voice came from outside the room. Felix frowned and said impatiently, "I'm not in the mood to eat. Let's go." Dean looked at him meaningfully. After one night, the others should want to talk to you about something. For example, how to deal with the aftermath of the escape of the demon. Felix's face changed slightly, but he forced a smile. "Yes, let's go together." Then he stopped the woman outside the door. "Wait, I'll get dressed." Dean and Felix changed into a set of clothes and came to another restaurant built in midair. This restaurant was built in the suspension of the lowest floor of the factory. It was surrounded by glass pipes, so they could see the situation below. The dining table was very long, and there were exquisite vases. The tablecloths were sprayed with perfume. It showed what kind of taste Felix liked to pursue in life. After Dean and Felix took a seat, Felix ordered 2 steaks to be served. These steaks were usually made on the spot after he came. The chef who cooked the steaks was next to the restaurant. He was a star chef. Felix ate slowly. He felt that the steak, which was delicious in the past, was now chewing like wax. He ate absent-mindedly. Not long after, footsteps came from outside. The white-bearded old man and several other senior executives of the factory came in together. They saw Felix eating at the table and immediately greeted him. Then they saw Dean eating with them. There was a look of understanding in their eyes. They knew that Felix was grateful to Dean for saving him, so he invited him to eat together. The senior executives came forward and said a few polite words to Dean. Then they said a few words about Felix's health and finally stated their purpose. "President, I heard that the demon escaped. He should still be in our bronze ship city. Should we contact the military and search the city?" The white-bearded old man asked politely. Felix's heart shivered. He unconsciously glanced at Dean, but he saw that Dean was smiling as if it had nothing to do with him. Felix narrowed his eyes and thought for a moment. "Don't alarm the military, and don't report this to the consortium headquarters. Once the military is alarmed, they will investigate the details and origin of the demon, and we won't be able to get away with it. If we report this to the financial group's headquarters, they will blame us for our incompetence. Not only will I be criticized, but everyone here will also be punished." Everyone was slightly startled. When they heard him say the word punishment, they couldn't help but frown and feel uneasy. "President, how should we deal with this demon? Are we just going to let him leave like that?" Someone asked. Felix thought about it and said, "We'll talk about it after some time. At that time, we'll just say that we accidentally found traces of the demons and report it to the military. This way, we'll be rewarded if we capture the demons." Everyone looked at each other and said to Felix, "The president is wise. President, why don't we report to the military now that we've found traces of the demons? The more the demons stay in the city, the more danger the citizens will face." A middle-aged man in a white suit asked in confusion. Felix shook his head. He snuck in with a military identity, and he's also using a military appearance for the time being. He just left, so I don't think he'll change back to his real identity for the time being. Instead, he snuck into the city with a military identity and found a place to stay. If we report this to the military now, once we find him and see his appearance, our matter will be exposed. The middle-aged man in a white suit said in admiration, "President is thoughtful." Felix smiled wryly in his heart. It was ironic and funny to think that the so-called demon was sitting in front of him and having breakfast with him. They were discussing how to deal with him in front of him. Everyone exchanged a few words and then left together. After they left, Felix looked at Dean. "What do you think?" Dean nodded. "Good." The chef next to them was secretly happy as he heard the words of the two. It was the first time that his cooking skills were praised by Felix. Dean asked Felix to take him to the prepared laboratory. The laboratory was very spacious and full of all kinds of instruments. It was enough for him to display his skills. "You can use it at any time," Felix said. "Use honorifics in private," Dean said. Felix was startled and bowed his head. "Yes." Dean left the laboratory after 2 glances. He didn't use it immediately. Instead, he asked Felix to take him to the factory and the production line to see the mecha. "The most powerful mecha we make here is the nine-tailed fox mecha. Chilling has always been using it. Felix took Dean to the warehouse where the mecha were parked. Ferocious-like monsters were either standing or crawling here. Dean saw the recovered nine-tailed fox mecha standing alone in the innermost part of the warehouse. In just one night, the mecha had been repaired. Is a nine-tailed fox mecha very strong? Dean was a little surprised. He didn't feel it during the previous battles. Felix couldn't help but feel heartache as he thought of Dean's 2 consecutive defeats. The nine-tailed fox mecha didn't last long in his hands. He smiled bitterly. This is already the strongest mecha we have here, and it fits well with Chioling's magic marks. Her basic abilities are flash vision and multiple nerves. One is enhanced vision, which is equivalent to an enhanced version of dynamic vision. She can see every frame of a bullet fired from the chamber. The other is multiple nerves. She can multitask, and her nerve response is particularly sensitive, 3 times that of other dominators. This nine-tailed fox mecha happens to be a sensitive type mecha, so her abilities can maximize it. She also has the ability to scream and cause dizziness, right? Dean asked. Felix smiled bitterly. That's her core ability. It's not to cause dizziness, but to cause hallucinations. Maybe your physique is too strong, so you only feel dizzy. If it were someone else, they would fall into an illusion. So, you also fell into an illusion at that time? Felix nodded, and then a trace of coldness appeared in his eyes. Those 2 bastards actually wanted to kill me as well. We spent a lot of money to cultivate them and let them enjoy their current status in life. Because you're not a king, you can't get their loyalty, Dean said. Felix was not convinced. But I can give them everything they want. They shouldn't have betrayed me. Between betrayal and life, they chose their own life. After all, interests are interests, not beliefs, Dean said in a teaching tone. Felix was startled and suddenly came to his senses. Chioling and Lucifer knew that he was being held hostage by Dean. If one of them got off the mecha, he would inevitably be killed by Dean. Therefore, in order to protect himself, they attacked him. Their plan was to get rid of him and Dean together. At that time, they only needed to say that he was killed by Dean, and there would be no proof. Although they would be punished in this way, it was obviously nothing compared to losing their lives. Thinking of this, Felix thought of Luke and the others. He couldn't help but feel some anger and inexplicable loss in his heart. The continuous betrayals made him doubt himself. However, after all, he was someone who crawled out of the consortium to take charge of things on his own. He had also experienced tempering, so he quickly put away his thoughts and introduced other mechas to Dean. In addition to the nine-tailed fox mecha, there was the ghost shift mecha. In addition, there were 2 4-star mechas, and most of the rest were 3-star and 2-star mechas. Only the headquarters is capable of producing 5-star mechas. Their combat power is comparable to the king of the demon race, Felix said to Dean. Chapter 1084. Felix smiled and said, Then do you know how many creator mechas there are? How many pilots can operate the creator's mecha? Oh, Dean was interested. It's the Dark Age now, and resources are scarce. All kinds of minerals in the Federation have been mined out. It's not like 300 years ago, when human footprints were all over the world, and we could find more materials. Felix smiled. The cost of building a creator's mecha is too high. Even our locked consortium has to be careful. A mecha pilot who can control a creator god is also very rare. After all, for an ordinary person's physique to reach the standard of a 5-star mecha pilot, not only does it require extremely high talent, but it also requires high intensity, training, and hard work. Not a single one of these can be omitted. But the Protoss mecha we make are different. We use the corpses of the monsters as raw materials. The cost of building a 5-star mecha is less than 1/5 of the cost of a creator's mecha. Dean nodded. The cost of production is understandable. But the pilots of the Protoss mecha are trained here. Any one of them can operate the creator's mecha, right? They can but can't be controlled. Felix said, The 5-star mecha are the focus of attention of the people in the Federation. The same is true for the pilots. If we let a demon pilot the creator's mecha, it would be easy to be exposed. Moreover, the pilots are specially assigned by the military. Even if we put one in, they would be detected by them. Don't look at the fact that our consortium can meddle in the affairs of the military and even poach people from the military. But the demons are the bottom line of the military and the people. They can't be touched. Who is in charge of the military? The President of the Federation. Dean asked, "Doesn't the military know that you are secretly studying the monsters?" The people don't know, and the soldiers don't know. But the President of the Federation and some generals know a little bit. Felix chuckled. Although this kind of thing can't be exposed, or else everyone will condemn us, the fact that our Lok Fei is making demon mechas is also beneficial to the Federation. We nurture the demons so that they can operate the mechas and attack the demons. This kind of benefit is in line with the Federation's main objective, so the President won't ask about it. This kind of dirty work is just right for us to handle. As long as we don't expose it and provoke public condemnation, there won't be any problems. Dean's eyes flashed. There was a silent sigh in his heart. He thought of the Holy Church and the Dark Church in Sylvia's giant wall. The world seemed to be always symmetrical in black and white. Or it could be said that it was a chaotic gray world. Because people distinguished the good, they defined the other part as evil. It was just like humans defined elegance, so they had to define the other part as vulgar. Will the President of the Federation allow the cultivation of the demons and the monsters mecha? Is there any agreement between you and them? Dean recovered from his thoughts and asked Felix. Felix nodded slightly. I don't know the specific content of the agreement, but we need to sign the military service contract for the monsters mecha. In other words, the military has the right to requisition unconditionally in times of war. Will the contract still be valid at that time? I don't know about this. Maybe there are other supplementary agreements or checks and balances, but I'm just a small member of the Lok Consortium. I don't know much about these things. Felix shrugged. Dean carefully stared at him. He judged the truth of Felix's words through subtle expressions and muscle reactions. From beginning to end, Felix's words didn't show any signs of lying. Under Felix's introduction, Dean went to the assembly line workshop that produced the mecha. He saw that the production workshop was mainly divided into 3 types. The first was the raw material processing workshop. This workshop was filled with the bodies of the huge monsters that had been transported. These monsters were dead, but their bodies were still relatively intact. Only a small part of them was damaged. The second was the assembly workshop. This was where the metal was processed into the modified monster's body so that the two were compatible. The third was the factory workshop. This was where the final details of the mecha were perfected, including the testing of the intelligence system, circuit testing, mecha weapon system testing and installation, and so on. There were many subdivisions of each workshop. For example, the assembly workshop was divided into intelligent assembly and metal assembly. There were many rooms inside, but there were not many workers. Each worker was behind a huge conveyor belt, wearing metal gloves and special glasses. They could observe the tiny tissues inside the magical object through the equipment. Then, they used the mechanical arms connected to the metal gloves to install the wires into the magical object. It was equivalent to an extremely delicate surgery, and it was extremely difficult. Do you want to go to the training room? Felix saw that Dean had finished visiting the mecha workshop and suddenly suggested. Dean glanced at him. No, go back and rest. Felix was surprised by Dean's stare and nodded resentfully. The reason why he suggested that Dean go to the mecha training room was because he knew that the trained mecha operators had demon abilities. Among them, there was no lack of people with powerful perception. Perhaps they could see through Dean's identity and bring him some trouble, but it seemed that they were seen through. Returning to Felix's room, Dean found some wound medicine to speed up the healing of his shoulder injury. At the same time, he said to Felix, "Is the day of the battle coming soon?" Felix was shocked and hurriedly said, "I'll get them to withdraw it right now." "No need." Dean waved his hand. "A sudden cancellation will attract attention. Proceed as usual. Pick a mecha with similar ability to me and dress up as me. Then let someone drive the 9-tailed fox mecha to fight. Finish the fight quickly and kill quickly. This way, the end of the competition will be more natural." Felix's face changed slightly. He thought for a moment and said, I understand. In addition, give me the information about the demons you trained, Dean said. Felix felt uneasy, but still agreed. The next day. Chapter 1085. Felix didn't take Dean to the viewing platform, but went directly to the monitoring room in the back. He saw that Dean was calm and wasn't surprised at all. He once again whipped Luke's family in his heart, then pointed to one of the monitoring rooms and said, This is him. His name is Lucien. There were technicians in the monitoring room, so he naturally put on the airs of a CEO. Dean was a little more respectful. He looked at the monitor and saw Lucien sitting under the viewing platform, bored to death. He picked his nose and put it in his mouth to eat. Everyone in front of the monitor was speechless. Lucien was burly and had a rough face. There were a few claw scars on his arms and neck, leaving dark brown scars. He looked very ferocious, with thick eyebrows and big eyes. Because he hadn't taken care of himself for a long time, his hair was disheveled, and his face was full of beard. He looked a little depressed. What's his ability? Dean asked. Felix said, according to our observations and tests, his ability is flames. He can instantly change the structure of the fat in his body, producing a special type of oil. Through the friction of his muscles, this oil will rapidly ignite and be released from all parts of his body. Furthermore, he won't hurt himself, and a special membrane will form on the surface of his body to protect him. In addition, he has thermal vision and a set of special combat techniques. Dean nodded. Fire-type magic marks were relatively rare. It should be similar to the Dragon Warrior, which was more inclined to attack and destroy. After watching for a while, Dean didn't stay and didn't say goodbye to Lucien. He left with Felix. On the third day, Dean felt that his shoulder had almost recovered. He brought Felix to the laboratory he built and asked him to accompany him as an assistant. Then he operated the equipment and drew blood from his body for testing. In addition, he cut a piece of flesh and used it as an incubator. Then he took out the parasitic soul worms in the factory, selected one, and planted it into this piece of flesh. There were a lot of parasitic soul worms in this factory, which were used to cultivate demon mecha operators. However, they didn't classify these parasitic soul worms, and they didn't even know what the corresponding abilities of these parasitic soul worms were. In this aspect, it was far less complete than the Shenluo Empire. Therefore, whether or not they could obtain powerful demon abilities depended on their own luck. Dean could not identify these parasitic soul worms, so he could only choose randomly. Felix was watching Dean's experiment from the side. He knew that Dean was monitoring him, but he could also take the opportunity to see Dean's secrets. But he didn't expect that Dean wanted so many experimental instruments. His purpose was to study himself. Felix had a strange feeling that this devil seemed to be very different from the others. After several days of research, Dean's harvest was great. As he had guessed before, the genes in his body had completely mixed with the origami factor. In each cell, there was a nucleus composed of the origami factor. It had a strong devouring ability. It could invade the germs that invaded his body. His antivirus and anti-germs ability had greatly improved. In addition, his gene chain was very strange. It was actually composed of different genes. After these genes were analyzed, there were impressively several groups of magic mark genes. One of them was the gene of the origami factor. In other words, his whole body was now composed of the origami factor and magic mark genes. There were also some of his own genes, but the proportion was only 1/3. This discovery made Dean's hair stand on end. If he absorbed more and more magic mark abilities, would the part of his body that belonged to a human become less and less? In the end, would he still be a human? However, what made him glad was that all his thoughts were still in the state of human, and he also had the 7 emotions and 6 desires of a human. Subsequently, Dean used the cut part of the flesh to cultivate the parasitic soul worms. After continuously inoculating a variety of parasitic soul worms genes, he found that the gene chain in that piece of flesh was more complex. But to his surprise, the proportion of his human genes did not decrease. It was still about 1/3. Later, after repeated observation, Dean knew the reason. Although he added a variety of parasitic soul worms, the genes of these soul worms devoured and merged with each other and did not spread. The origami factor occupies 1/3, the soul worm gene 1/3, and myself 1/3. Dean looked at the condition of his body and felt a little strange. He tried to add dozens of soul worms in a row, but the proportion of the soul worm gene in that piece of flesh still did not increase. It was still 1/3. This result surprised him a little. Later, he found that the genes of these soul worms were extremely similar, which was why they could fuse with each other. Simply put, these soul worms seemed to be a complete body. Every soul worm was like a part of a complete body. This discovery made Dean a little shocked. Could it be that all the soul worms came from the same mother? Or could all the soul worms be recombined into a giant soul worm? He knew that these parasitic soul worms were born from the extreme ice worm. Didn't it mean that these extreme ice worms also came from the same mother? Thinking of this, Dean suddenly became a little excited. If all the parasitic soul worms came from the same mother, in other words, controlling this mother was equivalent to controlling all the soul worms on Earth. This was a discovery that was enough to shock the world, because this was a shocking discovery that might help mankind recapture the Earth. Dean crazily retrieved all the stored parasitic soul worms from the factory for verification. The result was that without exception, all of them could fuse with each other. He did not know if all the soul worms in the outside world were like this, but at least he felt that he had grasped a great clue and weapon. If he used it well, he might be able to completely destroy these demonic worms that invaded the Earth. But soon, Dean woke up from this state of madness, and then felt extremely bitter. Only he knew the secret, but he couldn't disclose it to the public. The 7 kings of the empire were controlled by the demonic worms. This was a secret, but what was the secret of the highest level of the Federation? He had no way to know. If he announced it rashly, it might bring disaster to himself. This feeling was like holding the secret of saving the world in his hands, but he could not become the savior. He could only hold the secret in his hands. Perhaps this was a sin, but he felt helpless. He could not even save the person he loved the most. So how could he save the world? Even if he saved the world was not his, so what was the point? Chapter 1086. The experiment continued. Dean was ready to find the secret of the origami factor. In addition, he also wanted to know why the part of his human genes could always be maintained at 1/3. Could it be that his own genes were comparable to the origami factor and the soul worm? In order to verify this, Dean asked Felix to find several test subjects. These test subjects were poor refugees bought by Haas from the refugee area. Most of them were in their teens. Their families could not afford to support them, so they could only sell their children for money to support other children and adults. When these children were sent here, their bodies had already been washed. They were plain clothes, but they did not look dirty. They were just very ordinary. However, there was no lack of beautiful girls among them, and they were rather eye-catching among the many test subjects. The purpose of these test subjects was naturally to be used for biological development experiments in the factory. Among them, the talented ones might also be selected, implanted with magic marks, and cultivated as mecha operators. Dean saw these children and thought of himself, as well as Barton and others in the orphanage. If they were born in the Federation, they might face the same situation. However, although he was a little touched, there was no pity in his eyes. He selected 2 of the more robust teenagers as his test subjects, implanted origami factor and soul worm in their bodies. If it was successful, it would definitely be a great opportunity for these children, and they could become strong in one leap. When lying on the operating table, the 2 children were obviously a little nervous. Their black and white eyes were full of fear and a trace of pleading. However, in the face of the indifferent Dean in the white coat, their pleas were directly ignored. The operation was very successful. Dean successfully transplanted a part of his origami factor into the 2 children's bodies, implanted them with magic marks, and then observed the changes in their bodies. He found that the origami factor and soul worm were fighting with each other in their bodies, but they seemed to reach a delicate balance, each occupying half of their bodies. This situation was a bit similar to his. However, before Dean turned his eyes away, the first child who finished the operation suddenly turned pale and trembled on the bed. The next moment, a large amount of blood suddenly sprayed from his wound, dyeing the hospital gown red. Then bright red tentacles broke out of his body, like the claws of a monster, twisting in the wound. However, it didn't take long for these tentacles to shrink, age, and then lose their moisture and luster. The child body also stopped struggling and moving. He had already stopped breathing. This scene not only scared the second child who was doing the experiment, but it also scared Felix. Although he had seen some biological experiments before, none of them seemed to be so bloody. Dean sighed with regret. He quickly took out the dead body of the child and dissected it to find the reason for the failure of the experiment from his genes. Felix didn't know if Dean's sigh was a pity for the child's life or the failure of his experiment. He sat next to Dean and watched his busy figure on the operating table. He felt his scalp tingle and had the urge to escape. It didn't take long for Dean to find a reason. The origami factor had swallowed the soul worm and also the cells in the child's body. Most of the organs in the child's body had disappeared. Many of them were corroded by the corrosive liquid. The origami factor and the soul worm couldn't reach a complete balance in the child's body. At this time, the same thing happened to the second child's body, and he died tragically on the hospital bed. Dean dissected it, and the result was the same. He was surprised, so he asked Felix to find a strong guard to be the test subject. This time, Dean wasn't in a hurry to experiment. Instead, he thought about the transformation of his body by Crimson Moon and what Crimson Moon had said to him. Their idea was to create a god. With the help of the ice worm's super healing ability, the cells could undergo a cycle of division and reorganization. After thinking for a night, Dean carried out the experiment on the guard the next day. This time, the order was somewhat different. He first instilled the guard with magic marks, cultivated him into a hunter, and then instilled a small amount of origami factor into him. Finally, he used the uranium substance to help stabilize the origami factor in the guard's body. However, when the experiment progressed to this step, an accident occurred. With the help of the uranium substance, although the origami factor in the guard's body was stabilized, the soul worm cells suddenly rioted and swallowed the origami factor suppressed by the uranium substance, growing rapidly. The strengthened soul worm gene made the guard's body unable to bear it. Many of the important organs in the body quickly froze. Some were frozen, some showed signs of frostbite, and some accelerated division, turning into strange tissues. Strange! This situation was beyond Dean's expectation. He hadn't even started the god-making experiment yet, but it had failed? Even with the help of the uranium ring, the guard could still die? Was it because his physique was too weak? Dean thought of the time when he ate the flesh of the origami in Amelie's tribe. At that time, he was still a dominator. He immediately asked Felix to call over one of the two remaining dominators in the factory. This person was called Yumik. He had light yellow hair and a Western face. His expression was cold, with a bit of arrogance. After entering the laboratory, he nodded slightly to Felix and then glanced at Dean. He didn't take the initiative to speak. In his view, Dean was Lucifer. Although he had replaced Xiao Ling as the mecha operator manager, there was no need for him to flatter him. Maybe the next time Dean died, the position of manager would fall to him. Are we really going to use him? Felix looked at Yumik with some hesitation. After all, this was a dominator-level mecha operator that they had painstakingly cultivated. They had spent a lot of effort on him, and Dean's previous test subjects had all died without exception. He wasn't optimistic about Yumik's fate. Yumik looked at him suspiciously. He didn't know why Felix, as the CEO, would ask Dean. It gave him the feeling that he couldn't make the decision. Let's use him. Anyway, he's just a dominator. There's nothing to be reluctant about, Dean said casually. Yumik was furious and shouted, Lucifer, what do you mean by that? Don't think that you can do whatever you want just because you saved the CEO. If it was me that night, not only could I have saved the CEO, but I could have also caught the demon. If you have the ability, then fight me fairly. Noisy. Dean came in front of him. Under Yumik's angry gaze, he suddenly reached out his hand. It seemed slow, but in an instant he grabbed Yumik's neck and lifted him to the operating table. Yumik's mind was blank. He didn't see Dean's movements at all, but the 5 fingers on his neck were as hard as an eagle's claw. It made it hard for him to breathe. He was horrified. How can you have such strong strength? Shoo. Dean made a gesture. While Yumik was stunned, Dean suddenly punched his temple. Yumik's brain buzzed, and he fainted on the spot. Chapter 1087. Dean's first step was to replicate Yumik's original state, then analyze Crimson Moon's thoughts and give him the God creation experiment. However, something unexpected happened again. As soon as Yumik's body was implanted with the origami factor, a mutation occurred. His body rapidly decayed, and his death was as tragic as the others. How could this be? Dean was completely puzzled. It seemed that the difference in physique was useless in the face of the origami factor. Why could Yumik, who was also a master, not absorb the origami factor, but he could? Was it because of Splitter's magic mark? He couldn't figure it out. Suddenly, the scene that flashed through his mind when Crimson Moon read his memories appeared in his mind. In the familiar laboratory, his parents' faces and their slightly wriggling lips. His heart suddenly twitched fiercely, and he felt a suffocating pain. The next moment, he flipped over the operating table in a rage, smashed everything around him, turned around, and left the laboratory. Felix was frightened, but he still obediently followed behind Dean. However, he didn't dare to get too close, lest Dean would vent his anger on him. What kind of experiment is he doing? Why is it so difficult? Felix's eyes flashed as he looked at Dean's back as he walked in front of him. From the time Dean kept asking for test subjects, he could see that Dean was changing different test subjects as materials. However, even Yumik, who had a master's physique, couldn't resist it. It showed how dangerous this experiment was. In the next few days, Dean didn't continue the experiment. His emotional performance was very unstable, which made Felix feel frightened. He wanted to escape from Dean, but he was afraid that such an action would anger him. The inseparability of the two attracted the attention of other high-level personnel, but no one dared to rashly ask. There were even some rumors, such as that Felix liked men. As for why it wasn't said that Lucifer liked men, the reason was very simple. When the two stood together, Felix's handsome face always looked a little feminine, unlike Lucifer's rough. It was obvious at a glance who had a problem with their sexual orientation. These rumors naturally fell into Felix's ears, which made him twitch with anger. However, he couldn't take the initiative to provoke his anger, so he could only grit his teeth and swallow the bitter fruit. Chairman Mr. Farrow, the financial group's consultant, will arrive at 11 tomorrow. Felix's secretary relayed the news from Mr. Farrow's secretary to Felix. She glanced at Dean, who was sitting on the sofa next to her. There was a trace of jealousy in her eyes. Felix had always doted on her before Dean came, but now he basically didn't invite her into his office outside of work hours. She was completely put into the cold palace. Dean felt an inexplicable hostility and recovered from his thoughts. He glanced at Felix's secretary and slightly frowned. After a moment of careful examination, he found that there was no killing intent in the hostility, so he let it go. He was too lazy to interrogate. Mr. Farrow is coming? Felix was shocked, and then he was secretly delighted. This way, he would have a chance to spread the news of this place. He immediately nodded and ordered, "Prepare a sumptuous lunch tomorrow. Mr. Farrow's favorite foie gras. Remember to fly it over on time tomorrow morning." The secretary nodded and left. Felix breathed a sigh of relief and turned to Dean. "Farrow is a special consultant of the consortium. He comes to inspect twice a year. It's June now, so he should be here to evaluate our performance in the first half of the year. I'll entertain him." Dean nodded and didn't say anything. Felix was relieved to see that Dean didn't stop him, but he secretly sneered in his heart. The next day, a white man came to the factory with 2 bodyguards. Felix and several high-level executives greeted them on the ground. To Felix's surprise, Dean didn't follow them. It seemed that he didn't want to show his face in public. Felix guessed that Dean should have taken into account that Pharaoh's bodyguards had demon abilities and was worried that he would be exposed, so he went into hiding. This was just convenient for him to pass the news. The more he thought of this, the happier he became. He hugged Pharaoh and went to his own restaurant at the bottom of the factory. Several high-level executives accompanied Pharaoh to eat and drink. During this period, Felix secretly passed the information he had prepared to Pharaoh by clinking glasses. Pharaoh was puzzled, but when he saw the look Felix gave him, it seemed that there was another reason. He quietly put away the information. When the dinner was over, Pharaoh returned to the room that Felix had arranged for him. He opened the note and saw the contents. What? The demon kidnapped him and is lurking around him? And it's a demon at the level of the Lord of the Abyss. Pharaoh's face changed. He was a little horrified. He even suspected that this was Felix's prank, but he thought that Felix wouldn't dare to play such a big joke. He immediately paced back and forth in the room. In the evening, Pharaoh found an excuse and said that the inspection was over. He hurriedly left with the 2 bodyguards and took a helicopter to the ground. After the helicopter took off, Pharaoh gave Felix a look and told him to stabilize the situation. Felix nodded slightly, and the 2 tacitly waved goodbye. When Felix returned to the factory, he found that Dean wasn't in his office. He immediately asked his secretary. The secretary was angry to see that Felix was looking for Dean, but he could only answer honestly. Mr. Lucifer said that he's in the laboratory and that no one should disturb him. Laboratory? Did he go to do those damn experiments again? Felix shuddered as he thought of the tragic deaths of Dean's test subjects. At this time, he noticed the secretary's flirtatious eyes and the slightly open collar. He could see the 2 halves of her snow-white skin. He felt the blood pressure in his body suddenly rise. During the period when he was captured by Dean, he had been in fear every day and had been suppressed for too long. Today was a rare opportunity to leave Dean's sight, so he could be presumptuous. However, the evil thoughts in his heart surged and were extinguished. This was a rare opportunity, and he couldn't waste it on a woman. He quickly found someone to make arrangements and was ready to evacuate at any time. Mr. Pharaoh, why are you in such a hurry to go back? Didn't you say that you were going to play here for a few more days? The helicopter pilot asked Pharaoh. He had long heard that the test subjects here were good and wanted to take the opportunity to play tonight. He didn't expect to leave before the sky was dark. A demon has escaped and kidnapped Felix, Pharaoh said with a gloomy face. The helicopter pilot was startled and said in astonishment, "How is that possible? I saw that everyone in the factory is in good order. There's no feeling of being kidnapped at all. That's the scariest part." Pharaoh took a deep breath, his blue eyes full of fear. This demon has occupied this place. If I hadn't run into them today, I don't know how long they would have occupied this place. Also, this is the Lord of the Abyss. The headquarters would have to send at least 2 5-star mechas to rescue Felix from his hands. Hearing this, the pilot sucked in a breath of cold air, and the expressions of the 2 bodyguards next to him also changed. "Hey, what's that?" Suddenly, the pilot exclaimed as he looked at the display on the radar. The base of the helicopter suddenly exploded, and Pharaoh, who was sitting inside, was pierced by the debris on the spot. The violent impact hit him, and his body turned into meat paste. The 2 bodyguards reacted, their faces full of fear. They had just entered the demon's body when a black shadow quickly attacked and passed over them. Their bodies were cut into 7 or 8 pieces and scattered in the air. The pilot was so scared that his face turned pale. He yelled and operated the helicopter, trying to stabilize the crash, but a sharp blade suddenly stabbed out from behind the seat and pierced through his head. The helicopter roared as it fell. The throttle was ignited, and it exploded. A figure appeared in the flames. It was Dean, his palms ignited with flames, and he patted the bodies that were burning with gasoline, burning them to ashes. There were no traces left, and there was no way to know how they died. Chapter 1088. While Felix was preparing the route of retreat, he sent his personal guard to squat outside the laboratory to wait for Dean and report to him immediately if there was any movement. However, not long after the guards he sent out left, they came running back. Felix's heart skipped a beat when he saw the guard rushing back. The guard hurriedly said, "President, Mr. Lucifer isn't in the laboratory." I asked the guards, and no one saw him go in. Felix's heart sank. The next moment, he suddenly thought of Phaler, who had just left, and his face changed. "President, were you looking for me?" At this time, a light voice was heard. Felix instinctively shuddered. He looked up and saw Dean slowly walking down the steps with a smile on his face. He was very easygoing, but Felix could feel the chill in Dean's eyes, as if he had fallen into an ice cave. After standing there for 2 seconds, Felix reacted. His face took a 180-degree turn, and he squeezed out a smile. "Where did you go? I was just about to find you." When the surrounding guards heard this, they all cast strange looks at Felix. Felix was in no mood to pay attention to anything else at the moment. His heart was pounding, and he was full of panic. He was afraid that Dean would kill him on the spot. This demon was overbearing and cruel. He couldn't use common sense to infer anything. "Then let's go to your office to talk," Dean said. Felix's face was pale, and he nodded. All right. The two entered the office and closed the door. The soundproofing effect of Felix's office was very strong. Unless there was a loud quarrel inside, one wouldn't be able to hear what was said even if they stood by the door. After all, these people had ordinary physiques. Dean sat down on Felix's office chair. Seeing that no one was gossiping outside, he put his ear to the door to eavesdrop. Then he said to Felix, "Are you going to sneak out? You're a very smart person. Why do you always do these stupid things?" Felix's mouth twitched. He suddenly felt that his lips were a bit sour recently. He touched his mouth and smiled bitterly. "How could I sneak out? We're in the wilderness, and there's nowhere to run." Dean saw that he didn't admit it, so he didn't continue to ask. He sighed. "There is such a big opportunity in front of you, but you treat it as a danger. This is why you're ordinary until now. The opportunity is in front of you, but you can't grasp it." Felix froze for a moment and was confused. Dean said that he was ordinary, which made him speechless. He was the president of a Haas company in Copper Ship City. Even the mayor of Copper Ship City had to be polite to me and call me brother. How could this be called ordinary? How do you expect those people who are quietly building society to feel? He could only keep this thought in his mind, not daring to refute it. He innocently asked, "Opportunity? What opportunity?" Dean was speechless. "Am I not your opportunity?" Felix was dumbfounded. He was puzzled, but he didn't dare to rashly ask for fear of angering Dean. After thinking for a moment, he tactfully asked, "Although you are powerful, but I'm just an ordinary person. I really don't understand." Dean suddenly felt that he might have chosen the wrong person. He was silent for a moment, and then said with an indifferent expression, "I can make a deal with you. I'll let your status in the Lock Consortium rise to the position you've always dreamed of, and I also need you to help me a little. After all, my identity in the Federation is somewhat sensitive, and it's not suitable for me to appear in public." Felix suddenly realized that Dean was looking for him to cooperate. The opportunity he's talking about is cooperation. No, this is not cooperation. He wants me to become his puppet and help him lurk in the Federation. Felix instantly sobered up, and his heart went cold. His first reaction was to refuse, but he was afraid of angering Dean, so he immediately prepared to use a tactful way to express himself, or to promise first to stabilize the demon. Suddenly, a thought emerged in his mind. With the help of the demon's power, maybe I can climb to a higher position in the family. As soon as this idea came out, he was shocked. He hurriedly abandoned the idea, not daring to think about it. It had to be known that the crime of colluding with the demon was the most serious crime in the Federation. Although he had cultivated the demon in private, it was completely different from colluding with the demon. Cultivating the demon was the business of the Lock Consortium, and the Consortium would bear the responsibility if something went wrong. But colluding with the real demon was not only a violation of the interests of the people, but the 4 consortiums were also victims. No one would stand on his side and bear the responsibility for him. Dean quietly looked at Felix. Although his face remained calm, his slightly trembling eyelids, his pounding heartbeat, and the accelerated secretion of cold sweat from his pores all showed his nervousness and uneasiness. He didn't disturb him, but quietly waited for him to sort out his thoughts. After a while, Felix's violently beating heart gradually calmed down, but it was still beating very fast. I'm a little curious. Why didn't you talk to me about cooperation in the beginning? Dean looked straight into his eyes and said, because the moment I came out of the cage, I wanted to kill everyone here. Felix took a light breath. He felt the air was cold, and his heart was about to freeze. He suddenly thought of Dean's indifferent eyes when he was doing the experiment. It seemed that there was no emotion in his eyes. It turned out that in his heart, he had already regarded everyone in the factory as dead people. If this place was completely slaughtered, then Dean's whereabouts would naturally be hidden. Then why did you change your mind? Felix swallowed his saliva and asked in a trembling voice. Dean thought for a moment and said, because I think you still have some value. Felix was startled, and his heart inexplicably relaxed a lot. But suddenly he became nervous again. Did Dean see his value because of the deal they just talked about? If that was the case, then refusing the deal was tantamount to suicide. I promise you. Felix didn't think much and happily agreed. As long as he could get rid of Dean, there would be ways to punish him in the future. Locke Felix, 26 years old. He was born in the Locke Consortium. His father is a director of the consortium. Unmarried. He graduated from the Royal University of Shenyang. He has a PhD in Mecha Department. Dean spoke in an indifferent tone. How do you know? Felix was inexplicably shocked and involuntarily interrupted Dean's words. Dean indifferently said, you are not the only one here who is willing to submit to me. But you never left me. Felix couldn't help but shout. But you need to sleep, Dean said. Felix was startled. He understood that when he was sleeping, Dean had contacted others. Thinking of this, his heart was filled with bursts of cold air. He had slept many times. Who knew how many things he had done in such a long time? He suddenly felt that the people around him weren't worthy of trust. No one knew if there were traitors among them who were on Dean's side. Chapter 1089. Your father is one of the 13 directors of the Locke Consortium, and your father has many children. You are by no means the most outstanding one among them. Your brother serves as the regional president of the 8 cities in North China, and your sister serves as the president of the Haas branch in Trot City. Their status is higher than yours. Dean tapped his fingers on the table and slowly said, if you cooperate with me, you can squeeze them out in the future and inherit your father's position. Otherwise, you will fail in the competition. As for the consequences of failure, you know it in your heart. Felix's face turned ugly. Dean had spoken to the bottom of his heart. Although he was a top figure in Copper Ship City, young and loved by local rich businessmen, everyone had their own difficulties and pressures. His pressure came from his brother and sister, who were better than him. Needless to say, his brother was the president of the Northern China District. His sister's Trot City was also one of the 12 star cities in the Federation. It was far from being comparable to his frontier Copper Ship City. It was rich in resources and had a large population. Naturally, the contacts were extremely wide. In the future, in the competition for his father's position, it was enough to push him to the ground and rub him. If we cooperate, what do I need to do? Felix asked. Dean indifferently said, I need a legal identity in the Federation. Then I will operate with this identity and become a new big group in the Federation. At that time, the power of this group will be divided to your side. This is your power, and also your trump card to compete with your brother and sister for your father's position. I will use this group to continue to snowball and get what I want. If you are obedient enough, maybe in the future you will not only get a small position on the board, but the chairman of the entire Locke Consortium. Felix's eyelids twitched when he heard the word chairman. His heart suddenly surged, but he quickly calmed himself down. The chairman of the Locke Consortium was a real giant in the Federation. Naturally, it was his dream goal, but in all fairness, he knew his ability. Being able to inherit his father's position on the board was already the limit. The Federation isn't like the demons. The order here is strict. It's very difficult to become a big group in a short time. Money isn't easy to earn. Felix calmly said. He wasn't confused by Dean's flattery. Dean could infer the changes in his mentality from his heartbeat. Although he was tempted, but he was able to restrain himself. Dean's eyes showed a bit of satisfaction. You don't have to worry about this. I have my own way. Order's like a collar on the neck of ordinary people. Some people are willing to wear it, and some don't. Felix's expression changed slightly, and he said, Don't do anything rash. You might be very strong, but there are surveillance cameras everywhere. If something happens, it'll be very easy to track you down. Who said that I'm going to use force? Dudian didn't want to say more. Did the four consortiums abide by the rules of the game set by the president? No, but they can get the Federation president to change the rules. Felix was startled. He couldn't help but frown as he understood the meaning of Dean's words. He really couldn't figure out how Dean could operate a big group if he was given an ordinary Federation legal identity. Even he couldn't do it. After all, the business and social class here had been solidified. It was impossible to break it. Occasionally, a small local tyrant would be born, and they would rely on some opportunistic businesses to develop. Even if there were innovative businesses or plans that had the significance of reform, they would eventually be acquired by the big consortiums. The big consortiums could only taste the sweetness. I can cooperate with you if you don't use violence and don't kill innocent people. Felix hesitated. Dean indifferently smiled, got up, and patted Felix's shoulder. Figure out your situation. Either pay absolute loyalty and cooperate with me, or choose another path. Protect your Federation and consortium, and then die without a complete corpse. After the memorial service is over, no one will think of you again, except your creditors. Felix's face slightly changed. His eyes flashed. I promise you. In that case, prepare my identity in 7 days. A clean resume will do. I have to be around 20 years old. It would be best if I graduated from a biological research university and have no family ties. Dean said. Felix nodded. That's easy. Dean knew what kind of power and corruption were contained in the word easy. He smiled. In addition, we will sign another contract. This is our cooperation contract. I will need your financial help in the initial stage, but not too much. Felix knew that the contract was to tie him to the same boat. He sighed in his heart. He knew that he couldn't get rid of Dean. The demon was smarter than he had imagined, and seemed to understand the Federation's system very well. It was difficult for other demons to understand the Federation, even if they explained it to them. After all, it was a different culture and system. It was difficult to master in a short period of time. But Dean seemed to be like a fish in water. He suspected that the demon had long gotten information about the Federation and was a high-level spy sent by the demons. However, this had nothing to do with him. He only hoped that Dean could fulfill his promise. He had no other choice. Dean didn't imprison Felix anymore. He had blocked the latter's retreat. He believed in his vision. Felix wasn't a person who would sacrifice his life for justice. He absolutely wouldn't have the idea of dying together with him. After all, he was a child of a business family. The concept of interests was deep-rooted, and his mind had long been corrupted. Dean came to the laboratory. Before leaving, he was going to do one last experiment. He was going to check his heart, for lumps had grown on the golden heart, and they hadn't subsided yet. He used his X-ray vision to check the situation inside, but found that all he could see was a turbid golden color. It wasn't as clear as before. He always felt that there seemed to be something inside his heart. Sometimes he would hear inexplicable heartbeats, and with his own heartbeat, it was 2 heartbeats at the same time. He gave himself a CT scan, but it didn't work. He could only do a heart test. The harvesting operation was very dangerous. Moreover, he had to do it himself. The posture was very inconvenient. Dean asked Felix to send people to guard the laboratory. After he was ready, he applied an excessive amount of anesthetic to himself. He felt his chest gradually go numb. Then he began the operation. He melted the skin of his chest, turned into a magic knife, and carefully cut the ribs in front of his chest. He tore open the muscle membrane and saw the beating golden heart inside. Chapter 1090. Dean carefully cut the surface of the golden heart. After feeling that there was not much discomfort in his body, he moved the knife to cut one of the meat lumps. After the heart membrane on the surface of the meat lump was cut, it automatically shrank to the bottom of the lump, revealing the lump inside. It turned out to be a hard object, not the pus or other liquid that Dean imagined. Moreover, the shape of this hard object was very strange, like an eyeball meatball. But looking closely, the surface of the meatball was stained with blood, and there were small, protruding sharp corners. Dean frowned slightly and felt a little disgusted. After all, this thing was growing on his body, and it was in the most secret part of his heart. He took a deep breath and cut the other 3 meat lumps one by one. He found that 2 of the meat lumps were wrapped in black tentacles, very small and messy. At first glance, it looked like the tentacles of an octopus that had shrunk countless times. Under each tentacle, there was a translucent crescent-shaped hook. This hook was very tender, like cartilage, but Dean felt a creepy chill. He had killed a lot of monsters, including the cubs of monsters. This cartilage hook was clearly a sharp claw that had not yet grown. He suddenly had a strong sense of fear. At this time, the second heartbeat that would appear from time to time sounded in his ears again. His pupils shrank, and he had an impulse to cut the heart completely to see what was going on. But he knew that if there was an accident, he would die. Adjusting his breathing, Dean held his breath and cut a small piece of the edge of the heart from the edge of the heart, which would not affect his life. Then he quickly pulled the heart membrane with the hook scissors and sutured the heart. As soon as the heart was sutured, Dean saw that the wound was healing. It was estimated that in less than an hour, the suture could be removed. He even felt that the suture seemed to be decomposing by the heart, and he did not need to remove it. After all, the suture was also a tendon extracted from the tail of the monster and could be digested. Dean was not in a hurry to test it, but used the ultrasonic painting instrument next to him to check the situation in the heart. Soon, the intelligent painting board next to him showed the appearance of the heart. The drawing was vivid, like a photo taken by a camera with bright colors. When the picture went deeper, Dean suddenly saw an unforgettable scene. A thumb-sized head appeared in the middle of the golden heart. There was a human head in his heart. This scene almost made Duddian jump up. After a long time, he looked at the thumb-sized head. It was a very white baby's head. The eyes were closed, and the eyelids were transparent. He could see the eyes inside, but the eyes were golden. It seemed that the eyes were staring at him through the eyelid membrane. It was full of strange and unspeakable horror. Apart from the head, the baby's body had also grown. The 4 lumps of flesh were its body. 2 of the lumps were like meatballs the size of eyeballs. There were 2 tightly clenched fists, and the protruding horns were its fingers. Inside the other 2 lumps of flesh were octopus-like tentacles. They were messy and ferocious, extremely strange. What is this thing? Dean could not help but take a light breath. Even though he had rich experience, he was frightened by the strange horror at the moment. Moreover, this thing was growing on his body. It made his scalp tingle, and the blood in his whole body solidified. He thought that his heart was overloaded, and there was a small problem. He didn't expect the picture to be so horrifying. Could it be that this little thing already existed in his heart, but it didn't appear before? His overloaded heart caused the blood flow to accelerate, and at the same time, it accelerated the growth of this little thing, causing it to grow 4 limbs. It was horrifying no matter how he thought about it. Dean's back was cold. He stared at the strange heart baby for a moment. Suddenly, his pupils shrank, and he exclaimed, "Is this an origami?" The upper body of the baby was a human, but the lower body was like an octopus with messy tentacles. He could not help but think of the origami that he saw in the giant wall of Sylvia and the other giant walls, including the origami in Amelie's tribe. There was a baby origami in his heart, and he didn't notice it at all. If it wasn't for the overloaded heart that caused 4 lumps to grow, he didn't know how long it would take for him to notice the existence of this thing. Perhaps it would grow unknowingly until it broke out of his heart. Dean's face turned pale as he thought of this. Even though it was a baby origami appeared in his heart, but it was too horrifying. Could it be that all the origami are born like this? If this is the case, then there are a lot of people with special conditions like me. Dean's face turned green. If it was really like what he speculated, then the water of the Empire was much deeper than he imagined. The Seven Kings might not be the ultimate fighting force of the Empire. After all, if it wasn't for the burden of his heart, his physique was enough to burst out the power of a king. He had already verified this point after many experiments. If every origami came from the body of an existence like him, then how many origami would there be in the Empire? Each giant wall had one, and there were at least dozens of giant walls, or even hundreds of them. This meant that there would be hundreds of kings, and all of them were cultivated by the Empire. But why were the Seven Kings ruling the Empire on the surface? Dean's thoughts were in chaos again. If the other origami were dead, then why didn't they resist? Moreover, his body modification experiment was completed by Crimson Moon, and Crimson Moon's experimental knowledge came from her creator Bolo. Although part of it was combined with the super chip technology from the old era, but that technology was only a supporting role. It couldn't be the core technology and concept of her god creation experiment. Bolo was the former king of the Empire, so it was impossible for him to transform himself into a vessel for breeding origami. What was the problem? Dean's mind was in chaos. He wanted to overturn the operating table in front of him. He had a lot of troubles, and now there was such a thorny problem. How should he take out the thing in his heart? Would the heart fail if he took it out? Chapter 1091. Half a day later, the gene chain in the heart was analyzed, and Dean had a more intuitive understanding. The main composition of the heart was the origami gene. There was no part of his human genes in it, but there was a lot of soul worm genes that he absorbed and the cell residue of the ice worm. In addition, there was a strange dormant cell in the heart. He speculated that it was part of the origami gene, but he didn't know what kind of changes it would bring to him after the dormant cell was revived. As for the origami in the heart, Dean used deep radio wave drawing to map out the situation inside its body. He found out that the young origami had a heart the size of a mung bean, and the heartbeat frequency was extremely slow. Occasionally, he heard the second heartbeat, and it was coming from this mung bean-sized heart. The power of the vibration was not inferior to his golden heart. Dean always had a feeling that this was a devil living in his heart, and it could break out at any time. According to the composition of the heart, Dean asked Felix to transfer a large number of test subjects to conduct experiments. After breaking out the structure of the heart, he had a new idea that needed to be verified. The hundreds of test subjects that were used for the demon race cultivation program were quickly used up. When he had more than 90 test subjects, Dean's experiment finally had a breakthrough, and the result gave him a glimmer of hope. My guess might be right. The origami in the Empire had been sealed for a long time, and they were all origami that had fallen in the War of the Old Era. In that era, humans didn't have the technology to cultivate origami. Moreover, Sylvia's origami were sealed in the freezer, which proved that they came from a place with extraordinary technology. Including the king of the ice worm, the origami sealed in the giant wall of the Empire were probably from another planet, just like the demon worm. But the origami in my body was artificially cultivated. Maybe it was a coincidence. Even Burrow and Crimson Moon didn't know the results of the experiment. Their theory was correct, and they used the devouring and integration nature of the origami gene as the core of the god. But they didn't predict what would happen when the origami gene and the incredibly tenacious ice worm were mixed together. From the results in front of me, it was resurrection. The genes of the soul worms are similar, and they are both tough and resilient life forms. The origami factor instinctively swallowed and fused with the extreme ice worm, inheriting the tenacious life force of the extreme ice worm, and came back to life. Therefore, a new life was born in my heart. Origami reproduce asexually. They don't need to mate. And now, the experiment has finally come to fruition. If I can complete it, I can create origami. This speculation was completely different from the first idea he had. But Dean felt that the possibility was higher. Moreover, the experiment on the test subjects had shown him the light of hope. It proved that his experiment was feasible. If he was given enough time and resources, he felt that one day he would be able to create artificial origami. To him, this was an unexpected and huge surprise. The origami were born with top-notch combat power. In the old era, they were able to quell the invasion of the demonic insects. If such a combat power was in his hands, he would definitely be able to overthrow the current regime and establish his own dynasty. At that time, not only would he have the strongest combat strength, but he would also have the greatest freedom. He could use all of his resources and strength to find a way to resurrect the walking corpses. The more Dean thought about it, the more excited he became. For the first half of the day, he felt that death was approaching. His heart was filled with despair. But now he felt that the world had opened a new door for him. He saw infinite hope. It just so happens that I want to start a group. I can carry out my experiment in this federation. Dean's eyes flashed as he thought. He ended today's experiment, and the excitement brought about by this new conjecture gradually subsided. His gaze returned to himself. This was the biggest problem at the moment. It was impossible to remove it while preserving the heart, but if he removed the heart, he would definitely die. This seemed to be a dead end. However, now that his vision was higher, and he had been using the computer to absorb the scientific and technological knowledge of the Federation, he did not despair. The heart needed to be removed, but he could find a new heart to replace it after it was removed. Heart transplant surgery was not a secret in the Federation. It was the patent of the rich. Today's technology in the Federation was advanced. This kind of surgery that was involved in the authoritative hospitals of the old era was now very perfect. However, Dean knew that his physical condition was special. Transplanting the heart of an ordinary person into his body wouldn't be able to withstand the pressure of his own body. It was like putting a chain on a sports car. It would collapse at the start. It could only suppress the heart of a magic scar warrior with a physique of the Abyss level. But the Federation didn't have much experience in this kind of surgery. After all, the rich were all ordinary people. Dean had a toothache as he thought about this. He felt that there were too many things that he needed to develop. Fortunately, although the situation was bad, it wasn't extremely critical. Moreover, he tried to control the rate of blood flow to slow down the heartbeat and reduce the consumption of the heart. He didn't need to go through a big fight in a short period of time, so there shouldn't be any problems. It's time to leave. Dean looked around the laboratory. He printed out all the experimental data and the computer log records. Then he removed the backups, closed the laboratory, and left. When you see the devil in your heart, you are already a devil. Dean pushed open the door to Felix's room. He saw Felix holding a book in his hand and reading it. He casually sat on the sofa and poured himself a glass of juice to moisten his throat. Felix saw Dean and immediately put away the book in his hand. His face was not as nervous as before. Now that the two of them were cooperating, he knew that Dean wouldn't hurt him. So he relaxed a lot and felt that he had found the long-lost freedom. "Is the identity ready?" Dean asked. Felix was surprised. "You want to leave so soon? Do you want me to stay a little longer?" Felix smiled. "Of course." Dean rolled his eyes. He was too lazy to tease him. "Prepare as soon as possible. Also, I'm going to see the demon tonight. I want to talk to him." Felix thought for a moment. "Okay." Chapter 1092. Dean came to the viewing platform and saw Lucian lying lazily inside. He smiled and said, "I heard that you were a subordinate of the Light King. Why are you captured here?" His voice was transmitted to the cage through the loudspeaker device. Lucian said lazily, "It's none of your business. I'm also from the Empire. I want to understand the situation with you." Dean was still calm. Lucian sneered and said, "I don't care who you are. Don't disturb my sleep." Dean thought for a moment and said, "I know." He turned to leave and had Felix bring him to the mecha warehouse. He saw that the mecha inside were a dazzling sight. The nine-tailed fox mecha operated by Chiu Ling had already been repaired. He immediately boarded the mecha and used the special code provided by Felix to cancel his original login. Then, he entered his fingerprint and retina to log into the mecha's AI warehouse and initiate the connection. Boring tricks. Lucian rolled his eyes when he saw that Dean had really left. He had been locked up here for years. These aliens had used all kinds of means to torture him. They had used beauty, alcohol, torture, intimidation, and so on. He had survived all of them. Instead, he felt that it was a bit ridiculous. Although these means were good, they were too weak. This time, they actually sent someone to pretend to be one of their own. It seemed that they had exhausted all their tricks. Click! At this moment, the passage opened. Lucian slightly opened his eyes. He was a bit surprised. Was he going to open the magic mecha again? Why didn't they inform him in advance? At this time, a nine-tailed fox crawled in from the passage. The metallic luster on its tail was suffused with cold air. Lucian's eyes flashed a trace of seriousness. He had fought with this nine-tailed fox mecha before. Its strength was not inferior to his. Was the opponent planning to use force? Oomph. Lucian sneered in his heart. Although his physique hadn't improved after being locked up here for years, his fighting skills had become more and more simple. He was confident that he was much better than other upper abyss masters of the same level. Even this nine-tailed fox mecha might not be able to suppress him. Moreover, he already knew that the weaknesses of these mechas were all in the core cockpit. As long as he killed the people in the cockpit, he could stop this thing. It's been a long time since I've sent someone to die. Today, I'm tired of living again. Lucian grinned hideously and stood up from the ground. His whole body was demonized like a flaming lion. His amber-like pupils narrowed, flashing with sharp, murderous intent, and he suddenly pounced at the nine-tailed fox mecha. Strike first and gain the upper hand. Nine-tailed fox's mecha suddenly rose into the air like a white shadow. It leaped over Lucian's head. When Lucian looked up, he saw that nine-tailed fox's sharp claws were actually grabbing onto the metal wall of the cage. She was sprinting on the wall, her nine tails flashing. It was a little dazzling. Lucian was shocked. This time, the nine-tailed fox seemed to be more agile than before. He took a deep breath, and the flames on his body became much more vigorous. Staring at the nine-tailed fox carefully, he suddenly pounced at it. Whoosh! The nine-tailed fox flipped in the air and landed on the ground somewhere else. Lucian's attack failed. He landed on the ground and sneered. What? Did your master send you here to run laps? At this moment, nine-tailed fox rushed overhead on. Lucian was slightly startled. He did not expect his opponent to be so easily provoked. Then he was overjoyed, burning with vigorous flames. Like an angry lion, he slapped the ground and bit at nine-tailed fox's neck. Bang, bang, bang. Suddenly, a few white shadows flashed quickly in Lucian's sight. The next moment, a violent force came from his chest, and he could not resist it. Lucian felt that the silver-white wall in his sight was moving forward rapidly, and it was his body that was retreating at an extremely fast speed. With a bang, his back hit the wall, and the shock made his spine hurt. Before he fell, a few white shadows flashed and hit his chest one after another. The bones in his body felt like they were shattered, and the pain almost made him pass out. He coughed up a large mouthful of blood. Lucian looked up and saw a spiral-shaped fox tail in his sight. Because it was twisted into a spiral shape, the tip of the tail looked extremely sharp, like a sharp awl suspended in front of his forehead. Dense killing intent came from the eyes of nine-tailed fox. Lucian felt his heart tighten, and his body overflowed with cold sweat. He did not dare to breathe. The next moment, nine-tailed fox put away its sharp tail and quietly crawled in the same place. At this time, a dull voice came from its chest. Do you have time to talk to me now? Lucian's pupils shrank, and his eyes widened. This voice belonged to the previous person. He took a deep breath. He knew that the other person was controlling nine-tailed fox and had shown mercy. However, he also knew that the other person would not dare to kill him. He sneered. You haven't come to me for so long because you have secretly cultivated a big killer. Humph! Don't think that you can get anything out of my mouth. I have already said everything that should be said. Nine-tailed fox's chest split open, and inside was a cockpit with surging flesh walls. Several blood vessel-like tentacles lifted the pilot's chair. Dean sat in the chair and quietly looked at Lucian. Do you want to live? Lucian looked at Dean, and his eyes gradually showed surprise. Are you really from the Empire? Dean didn't speak. His whole body was covered with sharp black blades. Spiky armor grew all over his body, including the top of his head. He looked like a monster with sharp blades all over his body. His pupils were slightly red as he felt the heat in the air. I can save you, or I can let you die here. It depends on whether you are willing to listen to me or not. Lucien's pupils shrank, and he felt the unusual feeling mixed in Dean's demonic body. He said in horror, "You are the Abyss? No, you're the Lord of the Abyss." You can think of it that way. Dean indifferently said, "These aliens can't cultivate the Abyss. They don't know the cultivation method of the Abyss. Your demonic body is so thorough that even if you're not the Lord of the Abyss, you are at least the upper Abyss like me." There was some surprise in Lucien's eyes. "You are from the Empire, but why do you operate the Mecca? Why are you here? Where are they?" At this time, he found that there were no guards outside. He suddenly had a guess in his heart. "This is my territory now. I have seen your records. You were arrested 9 years ago. The criminal level evaluation is 3S. You have the strength of the upper abyss." Dean indifferently said, "I want to know why you were arrested. As a subordinate of the King of Light, why did you come to the War God's Wall to participate in the border war? What kind of critical battle happened 9 years ago? Also, tell me about the King of Light." Lucien was more sure that Dean was from the Empire when he heard Dean call the War God's Wall, because the aliens only called it the Magic Wall. Lucien changed his expression and smiled. "So it was a misunderstanding. Since we are on the same side, let's leave here first." Just as he was about to get up and approach Dean, a murderous aura suddenly enveloped him, making all the hair on his body stand up. He saw Dean looking at him coldly, as if he was looking at a dead body, which made his heart feel cold. "We are all from the Empire. Not all of us are on the same side. I want to know whether you are a spy of the Empire, a traitor, or an innocent person," Dean said in a cold voice. Lucien's face slightly changed. He looked at Dean and said, "You seem to have a grudge against the King of Light. I won't tell you about the King of Light, even if you kill me. Then go to hell." Dean retracted the piloting chair back into the Mecca. Nine-tailed Fox was ready to make a move. Lucien's face suddenly changed. He quickly shouted, "Misunderstanding, misunderstanding. I was just joking. To tell you the truth, I was sent by the King of Light to reinforce the War God's Wall. But I also have a secret mission. That is to take the opportunity to sneak into the aliens' territory. I didn't expect that my mission would be exposed. I was caught in the process of sneaking in and was sent here. How can I believe you?" Dean said in a cold voice. Lucien said with a wry smile, "It's true. There is a rift between the aliens and the border guards. I suspect that there is also a rift between them and the Empire. Moreover, the position is very high. It might be a king." Dean's face slightly changed. He frowned. "Are you trying to provoke the relationship between the kings?" "I want to know about the King of Light and the Empire," Dean shouted. Lucien wryly smiled. He told Dean about the deeds of the King of Light. Dean asked about the situation in the Empire. Lucien answered in full detail, but there were some doubts in his heart. It seemed that Dean didn't know much about the Empire. Lucien became more and more scared. Was this a real alien? If so, didn't it mean that the aliens had mastered the method to cultivate the strength of the Abyss level? This was by no means good news for the Empire. He secretly complained in his heart. Unfortunately, he couldn't pass the news back. He didn't lie to Dean. He was indeed a spy sent by the King of Light to sneak into the Empire. He deliberately leaked his mission to another king's men. Then he was exposed and arrested. He was waiting for the opportunity to leave so that he could pass the news to the King of Light. A moment later, Dean drove the nine-tailed Fox Mecha and left. He just wanted to take this opportunity to understand the situation of the King of Light and the Empire. The result was that he knew more than he expected. The King of Light turned out to be an Imperial spy. Moreover, the situation in the Empire seemed to be more complicated. The Federation's spy had infiltrated the top level of the Empire. Did this mean that the Federation's top level had also been infiltrated by the Empire? The level of science and technology in the King City is really not inferior to the Federation. It's just that they deliberately suppress the technology and prohibit private research. All the power is concentrated in the hands of the seven kings. The seven kings are puppets of the demonic insects. It seems that the demonic insects are deliberately suppressing the technology. What's the reason? Dean sent the nine-tailed fox mecha back to the warehouse. He walked in thought. Suddenly, his heart shivered. Since the seven kings are controlled by the demonic insects, why are their forces still fighting each other? Is it that these demonic insects are not united? He thought of the results of his previous experiment. His heart suddenly became more chaotic. After returning to Felix's office, Dean temporarily suppressed the chaotic thoughts in his heart. He said to Felix, "I'm going to take Lucien out." Felix was surprised. "Why? If we let him out, in case he wantonly destroys. I want him to destroy outside. I want to see the Federation's security forces and see some reactions," said Dean. Felix was startled and then felt a trace of chill. He hesitated for a moment and said, "The Federation's security forces are stronger than you think. In case he is caught, it's easy to thoroughly investigate that he escaped from here. It'll be hard for me to absolve myself of the blame. It's very likely that I'll be relieved of my position. No one will be able to help you then." Dean said, "I've thought about it. Just modify the identity data that he entered into the computer. When the time comes for a thorough investigation of Haas factories, I'll find a singer to take the blame. It should be able to fool them for the time being." Felix smiled bitterly. "Since you've thought of a thorough investigation, it means that you've thought it through. But it's a small matter if the higher-ups thoroughly investigate our factories. I can conceal it, and it's not difficult to modify his identity data. But what if he is captured alive and confesses?" "Don't worry. A madman won't talk," said Dean. Felix was startled. He suddenly felt a chill spread all over his body, giving rise to a layer of goosebumps. "In addition, give me a detailed map of the city where your two dear brothers and sister are located, including the location of their factories. It's not just a simple map. I want to know the distribution of the various forces inside," said Dean. Felix's eyes lit up. "Are you going to deal with them?" Dean smiled at him. Felix nodded. "I'll give it to you later, but don't make too much noise. In addition, it's best not to deal with both of them at once. Otherwise, Father will suspect me. Don't worry. You just have to cooperate with me." Dean patted him on the shoulder. He certainly wouldn't deal with both of them at once. Otherwise, how would he listen to him without checks and balances? 2 days later, Dean officially left the factory. In these 2 days, he and Felix had dealt with the matters in the factory. They had covered up the news of his original escape, including the records of his capture. Felix had even sent people to the city's border to erase their entry and exit records. In this copper ship city, Felix could be said to cover the sky with one hand. It was not difficult to hide from someone. Dean and Lucien left the factory in the car and went to the city center along the maple leaf-covered road. Lucien was sitting in the front passenger seat. He was very honest. From time to time, he touched the black collar around his neck. He smiled bitterly. "Even without this, I won't show off. This is the Federation. How can I cause trouble here?" The black collar was put on by Dean, and he bluntly told him that it was a monitoring device. Once he caused trouble, he would activate the collar and his position would be exposed. Exposing his position in the hinterland of the Federation was no different from courting death. After trying it out, Lucien found that the material of the collar was the same as the cage that imprisoned him. He couldn't destroy it. This was also a tool made by the Federation to enslave the real demons. A moment later, the car arrived at the slum town at the edge of the city. Chapter 1093. What else do you think it is? Duddian casually asked. Lucien smiled. I thought that there were only a few human traders among the aliens. I didn't expect that there would be so many people in this small town. Is it a force composed entirely of humans? Don't you know about this information? Duddian was surprised. Lucien was unhappy with his question. If I knew, then why would I be a spy? I only know that there are a few human traders among the aliens. I didn't expect them to be composed entirely of humans. So what is the meaning of our fight? Isn't it the meaning of our war to rule the same race and enjoy the resources alone? Duddian said, Didn't your parents teach you to be a man of the people? Lucien frowned. There are monsters lurking outside, and we are still fighting amongst ourselves. When will we get real peace? Dudian looked at him. He was a bit surprised. He didn't expect this rough-looking man to have such ideals and beliefs. As a spy, he had sworn to defend his life. Dudian patted Lucien's shoulder. He couldn't help but regret that he was going to bid farewell to Lucien. But the plan wouldn't change. Although he appreciated Lucien a little, the car left the slum town and went to other small towns. Suddenly, Dudian saw a face on the roadside. He stopped the car and rolled down the window. Su Ming's sister? Su Mingzhu was shocked. She turned to look at Dean in the car, but found that she didn't know him. But the car the latter was in was a symbol of status. She was a little nervous and excited. She whispered, "Do you know my brother?" Dudian nodded. "Your brother has been accepted by Haas Company. If anyone comes to you for debt, tell them to go to Haas Company to find your brother." Su Mingzhu's eyes widened in shock. "My brother has been accepted by Haas Company? Really? Dean was once again aware of the influence of Hosker's company. He nodded. "Go back to Hosker's company and tell them that you are looking for your brother. They will settle you down. You don't have to live in such a broken place." After saying that, he scanned the surroundings. This small town was similar to the other poor towns. The environment was harsh, and the streets were littered with trash. There was even a pair of underwear with mud stuck to it by the gutter. It was probably the handiwork of some great thief. Living in such an environment, not to mention the serious air pollution, the water was obviously not pure enough. No wonder Su Mingzhu had lung cancer at such a young age. Su Mingzhu's eyes widened. She felt like she was in a dream and stood rooted to the ground. "Do you have a communicator?" Dudian asked. Su Mingzhu came back to her senses and quickly said, Yes. Remember this number." Dudian gave her Felix's number and waited for her to input it. "Contact him if you have any problems. Tell him that Xin Imo introduced him." Su Mingzhu was startled for a moment and quickly bowed to thank him. Her eyes were moist. She didn't doubt Dudian's words. After all, she was poor and had no money. Her brother was a soldier. The average trafficker wouldn't be able to kidnap her. Moreover, she recognized the logo of the car. It was a high-level mechanical car made by Hosk. The other party had given her this number. Obviously, he had considered that she would be kicked out of Haas Company. If it was another big shot, he might casually say a few words, but he wouldn't be so careful. "Are you good friends with my brother?" Su Mingzhu cautiously asked after thanking him. "Yes." Dudian thought, "I killed your brother. Can I be considered a good friend?" Su Mingzhu still wanted to say something, but Dudian had already rolled down the window. The car hummed, and the mechanical engine roared. It instantly sped up and left the street. "Brother." Su Mingzhu's eyes were full of hope as she watched the tail of the car disappear. She felt that the world had changed from gray to colorful and full of hope. She fantasized about meeting her brother again. At that time, she must personally make his favorite dumplings to eat. "You seem to have sneaked in here for a long time," Lucien said with interest. Dudian nodded. "I sneaked in with the identity of a mecha operator. This girl is his sister. Her parents are divorced. Her mother ran away with a rich man. Her father's debts were all left to his children. Her brother was killed by me. If the debtor knows that her brother is dead, he will definitely force her to die. Maybe he will use her body to pay off the debt." Lucien was a bit surprised. He didn't expect Dudian to tell him this in such detail. He didn't think much about it as he nodded. "So, this girl is indeed very likely. Moreover, she even thanked the murderer of her brother. It's really ironic. Her future life will be beautiful with the help of Haas Company. Even if one day she learns that her brother is dead, the pain will eventually fade. She will find her lover and continue to live her life." Dean casually said, "So you're quite kind." Lucien laughed. Dudian laughed. "I have always been very caring, but I'm picky about my partner." "That's right. If you have love for everyone and treat everyone equally, then what's the difference between you and a beast? At least you have to treat your parents and lover better than others, right?" Lucien laughed. Dudian casually asked, "Do you have a lover? Do you think I am ugly?" "No. I'm just worried that the world can't understand your beauty." "Haha, I like to hear that." The two chatted as they drove to the city center. Their relationship seemed to be like old friends as they talked about everything. After arriving at the city center, Dudien parked the car in a square and took Lucien to the nearby maglev high-speed rail. The high-speed rail arrived quickly. Dudien used the federal identity that Felix had given him to buy a ticket. The new identity was called Cheen Mo. He was a student majoring in biology at a famous university. His parents were divorced, and he was an only child. His identity was roughly in line with Dudien's requirements. Felix couldn't find a perfect match for him because of the time constraints. As for the real owner of this identity, he may not be alive at the moment. Although there was still 1 year left before graduation, Chinamo had reached the stage where he didn't need to report to school every day. Those of the same age as him had already entered the company for an internship or started their own business. Chapter 1094. North Desert City. Lucien was surprised to see the place he was going. Where is this? If I remember correctly, the place we were at seems to be the closest city to the border. Why don't we leave directly from here? This city is called Copper Ship City, and it is one of the border cities. North Desert City is the hinterland of the Federation. Dean said, if we leave from the border, we can reach the War God's wall quickly. But how terrifying are the defense forces there? It is impossible to leave with just a temporary identity. We can only go to the black market to buy a legal identity. Lucien was slightly startled. He looked at Dean with a bit of suspicion in his eyes, but he was not sure. His first instinct was to suspect that Dean had joined these people and deliberately lured him to their core city. However, Dean said that they were going to the hinterland of the Federation, so Lucien was not sure about Dean's thoughts. With the mecha in the factory, he can easily subdue me. Taking me to the hinterland of the Federation shouldn't be to deal with me. Maybe it's true. Lucien secretly speculated. The maglev train shuttled between the skyscrapers of Copper Ship City and drove out of Copper Ship City. The endless wilderness appeared through the glass windows of the train. The scenery of the wilderness stretched as far as the eye could see, making people feel relaxed and happy. Many people in the train exclaimed. Some people who left Copper Ship City for the first time looked at the wilderness with excitement, full of yearning and curiosity about the outside world. Dean saw that the maglev train was moving towards the boundless wilderness along a transparent pipeline. The pipeline was erected on the high wall of Copper Ship City. There were hundreds of meters of ground below the train. Once it crashed, no one would be spared. The train route is not buried underground, but built high in the sky. Is it more dangerous underground than high in the sky? It is difficult to guard against monsters that burrow into the ground, but bird monsters that fly high in the sky are easy to detect. Dean thought. He passed the question to Felix through the communicator, and soon Felix gave him an answer. It turned out that the god of science and technology of the Federation had created an ultrasonic resonator that could release harsh sound waves that were unbearable to monsters. But the effect of this thing was not obvious in the underground, so the train would pass from high in the sky. Even if flying monsters appeared, they could use the resonator on the train to scare them away. The train was safe and sound. 2 hours later, they arrived at the next city. Along the way, some people saw monsters appearing in the wilderness outside, but their vision was hundreds of meters away, so they couldn't see clearly. This made them feel excited and excited. After 12 hours or so, the train finally arrived at North Desert City. The periphery of the city was a desert, hence the name. Green plants were sparse, and most of the soil was sand and stones. Dean saw many small monsters living in the desert sand. He also saw a team of mecha operators hunting monsters outside the desert. This scene was naturally seen by other passengers. Some seemed to be accustomed to it, while some were so excited that they leaned on the window to look. Let's go. Dudien took Lucien off the train and followed the flow of people into the city. He hired a car on the side of the road, got in, and ordered, "Go to a Sima corporation." As the middle-aged, balding driver started the car, he asked in surprise, "You're employees of Asima? That's amazing. Does Asimir pay well?" Dudien casually replied, "Not bad." Lucien, who was sitting next to Dudien, seemed to be interested and asked, What do you think of a Sama Corporation? Dudian glanced at him, but didn't stop him. The balding middle-aged driver was excited. He did not hide the envy in his voice. Of course, Sama is the most famous company in Mo Bay City. They have the support of the big financial group, Tesla. Once you join Sama, your status will be upgraded to first-class citizen. Not only that, the tax exemption alone is enough to make people jealous. Third-class citizens like us have to pay half of what we earn, Sai. Lucian laughed. Do you know what Asimir Corporation does? The middle-aged, balding driver was surprised. Aren't you from Asimir Corporation? We're going to apply for a job. Lucian didn't wait for Dudian to open his mouth. Dudian frowned and said to the driver, Don't be distracted. We are pressed for time. Don't delay our interview. The middle-aged, balding driver saw that Dudian's face was indifferent. He didn't say anything, but secretly sneered in his heart. What arrogance! He was just applying for a job. The car drove silently on the street. When it came to the front of a building under construction, the door was smashed open. Lucian, who was sitting next to Dudian, jumped out. Dean's eyes narrowed. The middle-aged driver was horrified. He slapped the driver's seat and headed to the front of the car. Then he flashed out of the car. The moment he left, he controlled the heat and detonated the car. The car that was running suddenly exploded. The other cars and passers-by were all frightened. They covered their heads and squatted on the ground. Some rushed to other places as fast as lightning, instinctively escaping. Dudian looked at the direction of Lucian. He took out a remote control from his pocket and gently pressed it. Bang! Lucian felt his neck suddenly burst. The severe pain made him scream. But the next moment he felt his neck loosened. The solid metal locator had exploded and fell to the ground. He was puzzled, but his heart was relieved. He quickly ran toward the path. Although he didn't know what Dudian's purpose was, but through the middle-aged driver's statement, he knew that Dudian was definitely not taking him to the black market. Dudian lied to him, so he could only rely on himself. In fact, he never really believed in Dudian. He felt a trace of strangeness when Dudian told him everything. As a spy, his vigilance had always been very high. At this moment, he was running away with great risks, but he had already prepared for the worst. At worst, he would be caught again for interrogation. At that time, he would also confess to Dean. The sudden change in the street scared the passers-by. But soon the hidden alarm sounded. At the same time, a situation was sent to the North Desert City's Defense Department. Chapter 1095. Without a tracking device, I can hide in the crowd, and they might not be able to find me. However, I need to avoid the hidden cameras first. Lucian's mind was racing as he was running. Suddenly, he saw a large shopping mall in front of him. It was crowded with people. His eyes lit up, and he immediately sprinted towards it. The alarm went off outside the shopping mall. Although the guards did not react, the smart system detected Lucian's abnormal identity and sent out the alarm. Most of them were locals of North Desert City, and they had never left this place in their lives. For them, the war at the border was like another world. Their life was coffee, entertainment, and work. In the Confederation, the law was strict, and the crime rate was very low. There were basically no thieves or robbers. After all, there were cameras everywhere. For those under the age of 20, this was the first time they had heard the alarm in their lives. After a short moment of silence, the crowd suddenly became noisy. They hurriedly looked for the exit and prepared to leave the shopping mall. Although they did not know what was going on, the alarm meant danger and disaster. When everyone rushed toward the exit became crowded. This gave Lucian an opportunity. He aimed at the exit with the crowd and rushed towards it. His figure was as fast as a gray lightning. After he got into the crowd, he quickly twisted the muscles on his face, squeezing the muscles and fat into another face. Then he used his fingernails to cut off his hair, and as for the hair that was cut off, he burned it to avoid leaving any clues. After doing all this, he took off his coat, pretended to be panicking, and rushed to a luxury brand store. Under the panicked and confused gaze of the shop assistant, he quickly took a set of clothes and went to the changing room. A moment later, an ordinary-looking man wearing a branded suit walked out. Although the shop assistant was panicking because of the alarm, She could not run away when she saw a customer. She bit the bullet and said, "Hello, sir. The price of this set of Forest Wolf men's suit is—" Lucien did not wait for her to finish and quickly ran out of the store. He was only a little faster than the ordinary people around him, but he did not stand out. The shop assistant was stunned for a moment, and then she cursed aloud. She did not expect that Lucien was trying to take advantage of the situation. She immediately chased after him, but it was not convenient for her to run in high heels. Very soon, her sight was blocked by the chaotic crowd, and she lost sight of Lucien. Lucien followed the crowd to the exit after getting rid of the shop assistant. He looked panicked, but his eyes were cold. Looking at the nervous faces of other people around him, he sneered in his heart. At this time, he heard a few girls next to him talking excitedly about the alarm, wondering if there was a fire in the mall or something like that. He felt that the noise was ear-piercing and incomparably unpleasant. There was a nameless anger in his heart, and he had the urge to strangle these little girls to death. However, his rationality told him that he had to endure. However, these few little girls did not have the slightest intention of stopping. They chattered nonstop. He finally could not bear it anymore, and he shouted angrily, "All of you, shut up!" The few little girls did not expect that he would get angry. They were shocked, and then a little angry. One of them, a long-haired girl, looked at him coldly and said, "What does it have to do with you what we are talking about?" She sounded like a boy and did not have the slightest image of a lady. Lucien was furious. He wanted to raise his hand and strangle her to death, but his rationality made him desperately endure. The blue veins on his forehead were bulging, and his face was frightening. The few little girls were frightened by his appearance and took a few steps back. However, the long-haired girl was not afraid at all. She comforted her companions and said, "Don't be afraid. If he dares to touch a single hair of mine, I guarantee that he will not be able to bear the consequences." The other few little girls suddenly thought of the identity of her father and immediately lost their fear. At the same time, they found that although Lucien's face was scary, he was trembling with anger and did not dare to do anything. He looked a little timid, and they looked down on him even more. One of the girls said, "Look at his ordinary clothes. He should be an ordinary elite. Humph! If he dares to speak rudely again, we will go to his company to complain about him and make him lose his job." A cold light flashed in Lucien's eyes. He clenched his fists so hard that they made cracking sounds. He suddenly roared, "All of you shut up, believe it or not. I will kill you all." Except for the few little girls, the people around him were also startled by his sudden roar. Among them, a strong young man who often worked out took a step forward and reached out to push Lucien's chest. He said, "Uncle, why are you shouting at a few little girls? What is the point of bullying women?" After being pushed by him, Lucien's brain suddenly exploded like an oil can being ignited. His eyes were red, and there was a feeling of blood filling the air. The strong killing intent made him want to go crazy and drown his reason. He did not even have time to think about why he suddenly became so irritable. However, the last trace of reason firmly restrained his fist, and the violent anger made his body tremble slightly. How can this person be like this? He is so rude. He is shouting so loudly, so rude. He is already dozens of years old, and he still bullies little girls. The people around him pointed at him and talked about him. If it was the previous Lucien, he would not care about the comments around him at all. After all, he was a trained agent spy, and he still had this little bit of tolerance. Moreover, he was on the run, and even if there were thousands of people cursing him, he could still bear it. However, at this moment, he felt that these comments were buzzing in his head, and he had an impulse to destroy everything and silence the world. His breathing became heavier and heavier, and the killing intent in his mind became more and more violent. "Get out!" The voice was almost squeezed out from between his teeth. The strong young man shouted, "Who are you telling to get out? Are you crazy?" After saying that, he pushed him again. "Get out!" Lucien suddenly exploded, and he suddenly raised his head. The bloodlust in his eyes was like two clouds of blood, like a trapped beast escaping from the abyss. When the strong young man saw his eyes, he suddenly felt a chill all over his body, as if he was being pricked by needles. He could not help but feel a sense of fear in his heart, as if he was facing an evil beast. The next moment, he felt a buzzing sound in his head. Bang! The young man's head was smashed by Lucien's fist. Brains and blood splattered all over the ground. Many of the brains splattered on the faces of the few little girls behind the young man. The slightly provocative expressions of the few little girls suddenly froze, and in the next moment, they let out ear-piercing screams. The surrounding people who were pointing and discussing were all shocked and looked at this scene in horror. Their mouths were open, and they even forgot to breathe. This scene was too horrifying. Smashing the head with one punch, it was not something that a human could do. "All of you go die!" Lucien roared ferociously, and was the first to pounce on the few little girls who were scared stiff. With one hand, he grabbed the head of the long-haired girl at the front and pulled it in front of him. The long-haired girl's hair was pulled in pain, and she reacted and screamed, "Bastard, let go of me. Do you know who my father is? My father is Bang." Her voice suddenly stopped, and her head and jade-like face instantly exploded, smashed by one punch, like a cracked watermelon. Lucien was like a wolf in a flock of sheep. He strode out, grabbed the remaining few little girls, and with one punch, smashed their heads. The surrounding people saw this hellish scene, and after they reacted, they panicked and ran in all directions. "Scream, continue screaming." Lucien's face was stained with brain matter, and he looked like a demon. Looking at the people around him who were running away, he laughed and quickly chased after them. He lifted their clothes, and with one punch, some had their chests pierced and some had their necks broken. These people were like pieces of paper in his hands, so weak that they could not withstand a single blow. In the blink of an eye, everyone around him was killed, and the scene was full of blood like purgatory on earth. Finally, it's quiet. Lucien closed his eyes as if he was intoxicated and let out a light sigh, feeling comfortable all over. At this moment, there was a rumbling sound, and suddenly, a beam of light shot over. Lucien felt the danger a second earlier and instantly flashed, dodging the beam. Seeing the burn marks left on the ground, his face darkened, knowing that it was a mech, but he had no intention of escaping. He looked around and quickly found the location of the mech and said with a grin, "You two be quiet." After saying that, he quickly rushed out. In the process of running, his body rapidly transformed, and like a burning lion, he rushed out of the shopping mall. At this time, he saw that in the plaza outside the shopping mall, there were actually 7 or 8 mechs surrounding this place. Kill! Kill! The appearance of these mechs reminded him of the painful experience when he was imprisoned by Felix, and the murderous intent in his heart intensified, and he pounced on the nearest mech. While Lucien and the mechs were fighting, the people around the shopping mall had been protected by the guards and robots, but there were still many people hiding in the tall buildings in the distance watching, and, at the same time, recording the scene on their communicators. Dean also stood on a tall building to watch, and when he saw Lucien rushing toward the mech, he was relieved, and the corners of his mouth curved. It seemed that the drug had taken effect, and the time was about the same as he had calculated. In fact, inside the black ring on Lucien's neck was not a positioning device, but a kind of germ that he had concocted, which could make people anxious and crazy. Just as he had said to Felix before, he was going to release a madman, not a person. When the black ring exploded, it cut Lucien's skin, and the germ inside infected him. No matter how he hid, when the drug took effect, he would go crazy and expose himself. They can actually mobilize so many mechs so quickly. Is this the power of the city's defense? Dean looked at the mechs gathered in the plaza. He recognized the models of these mechs, most of which were produced by the Law Consortium, but there was only one 4-star mech, and the rest were 3-star mechs, so it would be a bit difficult to kill Lucien in a short time. Soon, Lucien killed a mech, but he was also injured and immediately rushed into the crowd outside. Through the demonized magic eye, Dean saw very clearly that Lucien's face was ferocious, and he was already in a state of madness, but his fighting instinct seemed to still be there, and he did not completely fight head-on, but planned to use the geographical advantage to destroy these mechs one by one. No wonder he is the abyss cultivated by the Empire. Fighting has long been embedded in his bones, and even if he is crazy, he will choose the best way to fight. Dean sighed in his heart. Lucian's speed was so fast that he quickly rushed into the crowd in the distance, and these onlookers were like paper, smashed in front of him or thrown away casually. For a moment, the onlookers fled in panic, and some ran in the direction of the pursuing mechs, hoping that they could protect them, but this had a great impact on the mech guards, so they did not dare to go all out to kill Lucian so as not to trample these people to death. Lucian ran all the way, destroying many buildings along the way, and many passers-by were killed by him, causing more and more destruction. The mechs could not display their full power in the crowded city, and were soon left behind. Dean did not chase, but used his thermal vision to track Lucian. Although he could not see Lucian, but the heat released by Lucian was like the sun. As long as he was in this North Desert city, he could see him at a glance. An abyss can run amok here. Such a thought rose in Dean's heart. Suddenly, he found that the heat of Lucian in his eyes was rapidly decreasing, as if his life was fading away. He was startled and stared at his heat source, and found that the heat was fading away more and more, and after 10 minutes, he was completely like an ordinary person. What was it that injured him so severely? He can't hide his heat source, and didn't move from the same place. Dean was surprised, and after thinking for a while, he did not rush to see, and was ready to wait for tomorrow's news in North Desert City. No matter what hit Lucian, he made such a big movement, and it would be announced on the news to give an explanation to the public. At night, Dean immediately saw the latest headlines of North Desert City through the communication device, which showed the disaster scene in the shopping mall, and even a narrow exit where a large number of bodies were scattered. The death was tragic. Dean saw that all the bodies were killed by a single blow, and knew that it was Lucian's masterpiece. What surprised him was that the picture in the video was not censored, and such a bloody scene was publicized without any treatment. At this time, the news anchor also talked about the matter of the demon, denouncing the demon's ferocity. Dean immediately understood that this was to train the awareness of hostility to the people of the Federation, and let the people of the Federation know the ferocity of the demon. No wonder the magic marks warriors of the Federation, such as Felix and Luke, were so afraid of the real demon. Most of them were influenced by this kind of news since childhood, and thought that the demon was extremely ferocious. At the end of the video, Dean saw the scene of Lucian being defeated. A beam of light fell from the sky of North Matian City. It was as if a meteorite was falling from the sky. It was incredibly fast and blasted Lucian to the ground. Is this a missile? No, it's a beam of light, but not a laser. Otherwise, with the size of the picture, Lucian would directly turn into ashes and not slowly disappear as a heat source. Dean slightly frowned. He did not expect the hidden technological means of the Federation to be more terrifying than he had imagined. There was such a strong city defense weapon, and it could easily defeat an upper abyss. Even if the Empire attacked here, they could only disarm and surrender in the face of these city defense weapons, unless there was corresponding high-tech weapons, or the king dispatched to destroy the city defense weapons, and then send troops to attack. Chapter 1096. At the same time as Dudian was watching the news, several helicopters and more than a dozen chariots had arrived at the square outside another landmark building. All of them were specially trained combative police. Although they weren't magic marks, but they had been injected with a special serum made by the Federation. Their physique had been enhanced, but the extent of enhancement was far less than that of magic marks. They were only 2 to 3 times stronger than ordinary people. Don't underestimate the strength of 2 to 3 times the strength of an ordinary person. After the combative police got out of the car, they quickly surrounded the square, keeping a tight watch on the surroundings. The demon attack during the day had caused the entire North Desert City's secret defense forces to be stretched taut. Although Lucian had been killed, why did the demon appear? Did he have any accomplices? What was the purpose of his sudden exposure? These were questions that made the top figures of the North Desert City uneasy. General Yao, in front of a helicopter that landed, Li, the head of the Defense Department of Mo Bay City, squinted his eyes and saluted the burly middle-aged man who got off the helicopter. He then stepped forward to shake hands and greet him. I didn't expect the chairman to send you here. Looks like the demons are going to suffer. Yao Jie smiled and said, Not at all, not at all. Minister Li is too polite. The chairman has already contacted the mayor and sent me here to assist you in finding the demon's accomplice. This demon has already been killed. I heard that according to the results of the forensic autopsy, this demon's strength is comparable to a 4-star mecha and has reached the upper abyssal level of the demon race. This is considered a big shot in the demon race, but he actually took the risk to go deep into the hinterland and appear in our stomach. General Yao, this way please. It's windy outside. Let's go inside the house. Li smiled and led the way. The two of them were accompanied by a group of secretaries and guards to the landmark building of the North Desert City. The security level of the building had reached the highest level in the Federation. It was said that even missiles wouldn't be able to hurt the people inside the building. The glass outside the building was made of gelatinous alloy glass. It was extremely tough. It was barely comparable to the hardness of diamond. Many high-end mechanical chariots and tanks used this kind of glass. It was a new invention of the Federation. The inventor of this invention had won a Lifetime Achievement Award and was included in textbooks. After arriving at the building, Li welcomed Yao Jie to the conference room. He ordered the secretary to prepare the materials and tea. General Yao, you've come all the way here. It must have been tough on you. If you need anything, feel free to tell me. We're all family, so there's no need to stand on ceremony. Li laughed. Yao Jie saw that his secretary was dawdling in preparing the documents. He frowned slightly and said, Department Headley, let's not talk about other things for now. This time, the demon suddenly appeared in North Desert City. Not only has it attracted the attention of the chairman, but there are also many eyes here. I hope to know the identity of this demon as soon as possible. How did he come here? Who are his accomplices? I wonder if you have any results here? Seeing that Su Tao was in a hurry, Li didn't continue the small talk. With a solemn expression, he said, After the incident, I immediately retrieved the surveillance footage. I'm ashamed to say that I couldn't see how he sneaked in. He seemed to have suddenly appeared in the shopping mall and started a massacre. From the surveillance footage, he disguised himself as an ordinary pedestrian and quarreled with a few girls before tearing off his disguise. Yao Jie knitted his brows. How is that possible? Your North Desert City is heavily guarded, and there are surveillance cameras everywhere. It's impossible for him to appear here out of nowhere. Have you investigated the records of the border? Li nodded. We have, but there's nothing suspicious. The only suspect is a student. Not long before the incident, a taxi suddenly exploded. Through the slow playback of the surveillance footage, we found that the door of the taxi was pushed open. With such great strength, it must be a demon. That means that the demon was in the car at the time. We then investigated the records of the taxi and found a student and his friend. The two of them took the maglev high-speed train from Tonchuan City. If that's the case, then this student might be his accomplice. Yao Jie asked, Where is the student now? Have you interrogated him? Li was stunned. With a strange expression, he said, How should I put this? In the beginning, this student was the biggest suspect. But after the investigation, we found that he should be innocent. Innocent? Yao Jie looked at him with confusion. Li nodded. After the car exploded, he was flung out of the car. Luckily, he survived. Later, the demon appeared not far away and attacked the civilians. His reaction was no different from the others. He was quite frightened. Based on years of experience, our criminal investigation experts determined that he was not lying. We used the artificial intelligence to conduct a lie detector test on his behavior at the time, and the result was the truth. Then, the demon appeared at the mall. He fought with the city guards and escaped. He did not give chase. From these few points, even though he is a suspect, he shouldn't be the killer. At most, he was held hostage by the demon. Yao Jie was startled. He couldn't help but say, but he was in the same taxi as the demon, and they both coincidentally arrived at Mo Bay City today. Just these facts alone are enough to capture him for interrogation. It's better to capture the wrong person than to miss out on any suspect. This is a demon we're talking about. Missing out on even one is equivalent to a disaster. Lily smiled bitterly and said, "Originally, I planned to capture him and interrogate him first, but the higher-ups sent word that this person's identity is special and he can't be a demon, so we don't need to divert our attention to him. Then, through some of his later actions, I feel that he really doesn't seem to be an accomplice of the demon." A message from the higher-ups? Yao Jie's eyes narrowed instantly. Who? The 4 financial groups? Lily shook his head. He raised his hand to point upwards but didn't say anything. Yao Jie's pupils constricted slightly. He was a little shocked. After a moment, the shock in his eyes slowly disappeared. After a moment of silence, he said, "Since it's from the higher-ups, it seems that he is indeed not a suspect. If that's the case, are there any other suspects or clues?" Lily nodded. "There are. When the demon appeared, there were a few bystanders who behaved strangely. They're a major suspect. Also, the forensic doctor dissected the demon's face and found that he had temporarily changed his appearance. There were obvious traces of twisting of his facial muscles. However, he was blasted by the true light cannon and his face was severely damaged. It would be very difficult to comb his facial muscles back to their original appearance. It will take some time." Yao Jie breathed a sigh of relief. After the forensic doctor recovers his original appearance, we'll know what he looked like before. An upper Abyssal definitely didn't act alone when he infiltrated here. There might be some despicable people behind him who tried to use him to do something. Unfortunately, he broke free. Chapter 1097. The actions of the other 3 consortiums have become more and more aggressive in recent years. Yao Jie's complexion turned slightly cold as he said, "I reckon that some people are already unable to sit still. The chairman is very concerned about this matter and may want to punish the chicken to warn the monkey. You must investigate carefully and find out who is involved in the Devil Race's attack this time, no matter who it is. Otherwise, the chaos of corpses 80 years ago and the nuclear disaster 30 years ago will happen again." Lily's heart skipped a beat. He knew that the chairman was serious this time. As for why Yao Jie was talking about the 3 consortiums, he had already guessed the reason. The terrorist consortium was not included, because the first leader of the terrorist consortium was the god of science and technology. After the god of science and technology passed away, the forces under his command gradually formed the terrorist consortium. It held the most secrets and weapons of the Federation, as well as the most advanced technology. It was the well-deserved number 1 consortium among the 4 consortiums. However, although the terrorist consortium was powerful, it had always been low-key. It concentrated on researching technology and pushed the Federation's technology forward. More than 80% of the technological products in daily life came from the terrorist consortium. In addition, it was said that all the previous chairmen of the Federation had been manipulated and assisted by the terrorist consortium. The 3 consortiums had been afraid of the terrorist consortium for a long time, but they didn't dare to confront the terrorist consortium openly. No one wanted to be the cannon fodder of the other 2 consortiums, so they could only try their best to develop behind the scenes and try to replace the terrorist consortium or at least not be threatened by it. Why would such a troublesome matter appear in our North Desert city? Lily smiled bitterly in his heart. If this was the worst-case scenario, then he would also be involved in the battle between the consortiums. As the Minister of Defense of North Desert City, he looked impressive on the surface, but in front of such giants, he was just a small character. He could be removed from his position or disappear at any time. On the other side, Dean had just finished reading the news when the communicator rang. He picked it up when he saw that it was Felix. "Your operation this time is too risky." Felix's anxious, slightly reproachful, and helpless voice came from the communicator. He had chosen a video call, but when Dean picked it up, he switched to a voice call. Looking at a man's face at such a close distance made him a little nauseous. The movement this time is too big. I heard that the 4 consortiums are paying attention to this place. They will probably send a lot of people to thoroughly investigate. Even if you act secretly, there will be flaws and clues left. This is the Federation, and there are surveillance cameras everywhere. It's not your demon clan's territory. Dudian calmly said, "Didn't you know before I acted? Don't panic. It doesn't matter if you find anything. As long as there is no sufficient evidence, then you won't be punished. You're too simple-minded for this kind of operation involving demons. As long as you're related to them, they can beat you up and force you to confess. It's just like in the Middle Ages and the Old Era. As long as someone said you were related to a witch, whether it was the sheriff or the surrounding villagers, they would all think you were evil because of fear. Our Federation's fear of you demons is the same as the people's fear of witches at that time. Forget it. You wouldn't know even if I told you." Felix was a little annoyed. His attitude towards Dudian was not so humble and fearful through the communicator. Dudian indifferently said, "If the wronged person was a noble or a landlord, the villagers and sheriffs wouldn't act rashly." Felix, who was in the factory office at the other end of the communicator, slightly opened his eyes. He was a little surprised. Dudian actually knew the history he was talking about. After a few seconds, he couldn't help but shout, "You're not really from the Federation, are you? Are you pretending to be a demon? No matter who I am, our identities won't change. Why do you care so much?" Dudian casually said. Felix almost vomited blood. "To put it bluntly, no matter what my name is, I will always be your uncle." He held his breath for a while before swallowing his anger and faintly said, "We should be considered as partners now. Our status is equal. As long as you're happy." After a few seconds of silence, Felix took a deep breath and said seriously, "I'll go back and tell them that if they catch you, let them deal with you leniently. No, it will implicate you." Dudian refused. Felix was startled. He didn't expect Dudian to say such enthusiastic words. He thought that even if he didn't help, Dudian would ask him. Was it because he was worried about implicating him and exposing his arrangement? But without his help, Dudian's Federation identity was that of a poor student. How could he get out of the military? Dudian hung up the communicator and didn't give Felix a chance to ask. Felix, who was at the other end, slightly opened his mouth. Looking at the watch that showed that the call had ended, he suddenly had the urge to curse. He felt that all the good qualities he had cultivated since childhood had been wasted on Dudian. If I'm a suspect of being a demon's accomplice, they should take me to the magic mark detection equipment. This thing is also available in the factory. I've tried several times, but it didn't detect anything. It shows that my physique is different from the average magic mark warrior. It's probably because the magic mark has been digested by the origami factor and doesn't exist on the surface. Dudian looked at the night sky outside the window and secretly thought. At this time, the communicator rang again. "I forgot to tell you that the entire North Desert City has been blocked. No one is allowed to enter or leave. You can only stay there for a while." Felix's voice came after the call was connected, but this kind of blockade can't resist the public opinion. It will be unlocked in a few days. Don't worry. If you're ready to rush out, it's best to lurk for a few days. It's not to the point of losing this layer of identity. Dudian indifferently said, and this blockade is estimated to last at least a week or even half a month. Felix was surprised why. The public opinion of the North Desert City is too weak compared to the public opinion of the entire Federation. Locking the city is equivalent to locking the demon's accomplice in the city. But unlocking the city is equivalent to releasing the demon's accomplice to the entire Federation. People in other cities won't do it, Dudian said. Felix was about to ask why Dudian inferred that it would take a week. Just as he was about to ask, he suddenly thought of something. With the traffic and trade of the North Desert City, the blockade for half a month was the limit. Otherwise, the city would be cut off from water and food, and there would be a more chaotic situation. I didn't expect you to even consider this point. Felix sighed. He was about to say a few words of admiration, but found that the communicator had been hung up. His mouth slightly twitched. Chapter 1098. The demon attack was on the news, and the whole North Desert City was talking about it. It had become a hot topic in recent times. Dean rented a house in the commercial district with the federal coins that Felix had transferred to him. During the day, he wandered around outside. There were many large companies in the commercial district, as well as some seed companies of top groups. He also saw several outsourcing companies that cooperated with Haas Company to help produce mecha parts. There were also pharmaceutical companies that had some strange drugs. Life seeds, beauty needles, water pills. Dean looked at several pharmaceutical companies and suddenly had an idea. He immediately contacted Felix and said, "I want to open a pharmaceutical company." Felix knew that Dean was going to set up a company, but he didn't know what type of company he was going to set up. He couldn't help but ask, "Pharmaceutical company?" You have to think about it clearly. Pharmaceutical companies are more troublesome than mecha companies like ours. Moreover, the market is saturated with pharmaceutical companies. Unless you can develop a new drug, there is no chance. "I know. Wait for me to transfer the money for the company," Dean said. Felix listened to his tone and knew that Dean didn't listen to his words at all. He rolled his eyes and said in a muffled voice, "I know." Dean hung up the communicator. Not long after, he received a notification from the communicator that a sum of money had been remitted to his account. He checked it and found out that it was 1 million federal coins. The remittance account was not Felix's, but an unfamiliar name. He knew that Felix was worried that he would be exposed and implicate him. Dean didn't act immediately after receiving the money. Instead, he wandered around the Science and Technology Park in the commercial district. There were many technology companies here. He strolled around and saw a lot of biological research instruments, such as microscopes, which could be seen everywhere. There were other special instruments that he had seen in the factory. They were more high-end than the ones sold here. They should be high-end products made by top technology companies. In the afternoon, Dean went to the Federal Bureau of Industry and Commerce to apply for a company and fill in the registration. "Please enter the company name," the smart robot at the counter said. The face of the robot was that of an Asian beauty. It looked no different from a real person. Dean thought for a moment and said, "Dream Company." Input completed. Verify name. Verification passed. The smart robot said, "Please submit the company address." Dean didn't submit it immediately. He left the Federal Bureau of Industry and Commerce and found a rental center in the commercial district. He rented an office building with an area of more than 500 square meters. This office building was ready-made. The interior was exquisitely decorated, but it was not cheap. The monthly rent was 80,000 yuan, which was higher than the annual salary of many border guards. After paying the rent and deposit, Dean made a copy of the rental contract. At the moment, it was late. The Federal Bureau of Industry and Commerce was closed and would never open at night. He could only wait until tomorrow to go again. It's already been a day, but they still haven't come to arrest me. Looks like they don't suspect me. Dean left the office building and returned to his rented house. There was no trace of anyone entering the room. He felt a bit strange. Did the other party investigate his relationship with Felix, so they ignored him? That shouldn't be the case. If the investigation reached this point, they would probably interrogate him even more. After thinking for a moment, Dean still had no clue. He could only attribute the reason to the Federation security force was too weak. That night, he used his communicator to connect to the internet and posted a recruitment notice on a rental platform. The next day, Dean prepared all the materials and went to the Federal Bureau of Industry and Commerce. He registered the company and received the business license. He returned to the commercial district and bought all the equipment he needed on the list. In the blink of an eye, another day passed. A few days later, the company was fully formed with all the necessary equipment. Dean's recruitment notice also played a role. 7 or 8 people came to apply for the job. Dean selected 3 of them, 2 men and 1 woman. The 3 employees looked at Dean, who was busy moving all kinds of equipment to the company. They were dumbfounded. They didn't expect to enter a new company. Moreover, the boss was so young. It seemed a bit unreliable. Unfortunately, they had signed the contract. It was too late to regret. They had to work for a full year, or they would have to pay liquidated damages. "Boss, are we a pharmaceutical company?" Ma Jing was encouraged by the other two. She bit the bullet and looked for Dean. She carefully asked, "Do you know what kind of medicine we're going to produce? What type? Do you have the formula? You don't have to worry about this. In a few days, the materials will be delivered, and you will have to work overtime every day for the first week. You should be mentally prepared. Of course, overtime pay will be calculated for you." Ma Jing saw that he was so confident. She quickly said, "I know. Boss, you have worked hard." Dean waved his hand and sent her away. He left the office building and continued to buy materials. A few days later, everything was ready. Dean called Ma Jing and the other two in his office. He handed over the written formula and the production project to them. "This is the formula. Follow the process. The new drug is still in the trial stage. Remember to keep it confidential." The three nodded. Ma Jing said, "Boss, rest assured. We have signed a confidentiality agreement. We will never leak the formula." Dean nodded slightly. He was more assured about this point, so he didn't say any harsh words. Sometimes the law was more useful than harsh words. Rejuvenation drug? Ma Jing was surprised to see the name of the formula. She asked Dean, "Boss, is this a drug for cell proliferation?" "Almost," Dean casually said. "The effect of the finished product is probably to regenerate broken limbs. You can use mice to test it. Try to make it in a week." The three of them widened their eyes and looked at Dean incredulously. Limb regeneration? The effect is so strong. Soon, the three of them thought of another thing. They couldn't help but sink. Dean said that the effect was so good. Didn't it mean that they had to produce such a drug? Dean would blame them for incompetence in case the formula was not good. The three of them felt a bit heavy in their hearts. They felt that the salary of the company was higher than that of the general industry. Dean also got up and left the company after the three of them left. The formula of the rejuvenation drug came from the alchemists in Sylvia. This kind of drug wasn't rare in Sylvia, but it was hard to find in the market in the Federation. Although the technology of the Federation was prosperous, but most of it was used externally, such as mecha, hot weapons, and so on. This was probably also due to the influence of the external environment. The Federation was constantly facing the threat of monsters and demons. These were all terrifying existences that far surpassed ordinary people. They urgently needed a strong power to protect themselves. Regenerative medicine could be regarded as a war miracle medicine in the old era. However, in this kind of battle where all humans were cannon fodder, things like mecha and firearms were the only useful things. Otherwise, it would be useless even if people could regenerate and become immortal. After all, the difference in strength was too great. If they could not defeat the enemy, everything else would be nonsense. In a place like Sylvia, the Empire deliberately curbed the development of science and technology. There were no hot weapons, so they could only rely on mutation. The focus of the two was opposite. One was biased towards the development of mecha, while the other was good at studying the mysteries of the human body and enhancing the strength of the human body. However, there was a market for rejuvenation drugs in the Federation. It was due to the external environment that the four consortiums were more inclined to study things with great destructive power. As the saying goes, when the sky falls down, it will hit the tall ones. The four consortiums were undoubtedly the top in the Federation. When the small companies were racking their brains to figure out how to make money from women and children, they had to think about how to deal with the monsters and demons. How to find the absolute power to rule the Federation. Chapter 1099. Among the four consortiums, the Terrace Consortium is the most involved in pharmaceuticals. However, Terrace Consortium isn't focused on pharmaceuticals. Their most influential drug is the Tai Chi anti-cancer pill. The official information says that it's an anti-cancer drug made from a substance extracted from the body of a demon. It can strangle all cancer cells. The demon mentioned by the Federation is the origami. This should be the decomposed gene of the origami. The person who made the drug is the Chinese clan with the highest status in the Federation. They use the ancient Chinese culture, Tai Chi, as the name of the drug. It shows that the inheritance of the old civilization is preserved here. Even Felix knows about witches and medieval stories. Dean thought about his next plan as he walked out of the company. Terrace was not focused on pharmaceuticals. Although other consortiums had their own pharmaceutical companies, their results were average. The drugs in the Federation could basically meet people's normal needs. Most of the diseases could be cured. Many incurable diseases from the old era had long been solved here. Only a few diseases could be fatal and had no solution. For example, being infected by the undead or being seriously infected by nuclear radiation. However, people living in the Federation would not come into contact with the undead. Only soldiers who went out to hunt would be infected. As for infection by nuclear radiation, there was no need to even mention it. Most of those who were infected were the poor people of the Federation. Their living conditions were poor. Even if such people were not infected by nuclear radiation, it would be equivalent to a terminal illness if they contracted some other serious illness. After all, poverty itself was the most terrifying illness. There is no market for conventional drugs. Even if it is optimized, there is not much money to be made. Reproducing the drug is bound to set off a storm. The rich and the military have a demand for it. This is not a basic demand, but a desired demand. Other consortiums will see this and come to snatch it. I have to guard against it in advance. Dean came to the street and glanced at the people and the surrounding steel buildings. He felt like he was living in the jungle. He called a car and told the driver his address. It didn't take long for him to arrive at his destination. It was a high-end community full of villas. The people living here were either rich or powerful people in the northern desert region. As soon as he arrived at the door, he was prompted by the robot to show his identity. "I'm here to visit Mr. Zhang in Villa number 7. Dean explained to the robot. "Please log in. I'll inform you," the robot said sweetly. Dean scanned his identity card and said, "The reason for the visit is about Mr. Zhang's leg. I can heal him." "Okay, I'll remember it. Little May will convey it to you as soon as possible," the robot said with a smile. Its expression was very vivid, as if it was a real person. After a while, the robot spoke again. "Mr. Zhang has rejected your visit." Dean frowned. "Tell him that if he misses this opportunity, then Dream Pharmaceutical will blacklist him forever. We won't sell him the regenerative medicine developed by our company. I'll pass the message to you now. Please don't be angry. Mr. Zhang might be very busy," the robot said again. Her tone was still very sweet, without the slightest bit of impatience. The dissatisfaction in Dean's heart was relieved. He couldn't help but sigh. Robots had replaced humans. Especially in this labor and service industry, they were far better than humans. After a while, the robot shook its head again and said, "I'm sorry. Mr. Zhang has rejected your visit and blacklisted you." Dean's face turned black. He didn't expect his psychological tactics to be ineffective. It seemed that this person had completely regarded him as a liar. "Since you blacklisted me, I can only blacklist you." Dean was a little angry, but he quickly dispelled the idea. He turned away and called a taxi on the side of the road to continue to the next goal. Villa number 7. "Dad, why don't you see this person? Maybe it's true." A beautiful girl with white skin was sitting on the luxurious sofa in the living room. She was eating strawberries while looking at the middle-aged man who was tapping his legs and reading a mechanical book. The middle-aged man was tall, and his cheeks were as if carved by a knife. At first glance, one could tell that he was very handsome when he was young. Boring liar. Humph, he actually found our address and knows about my legs. It seems that our information has been leaked, the middle-aged man said angrily. This person said something about Dream Pharmaceutical Company. The name is very strange, but maybe the regenerative medicine is real. If you refuse him like this, what if he doesn't sell you the medicine in the future? The girl pouted. Although she said so, her persuasion was not strong because she also felt that the latter was more likely to be a liar. But she was somewhat dissatisfied with her father's attitude of not caring about his body. "There's no such medicine," the middle-aged man said coldly. "Even if there is, it would have been created by the Terrace Financial Group. If they had come up with a new medicine, I would have known about it before he even came looking for me. Even if this Dream Inc.'s regenerative medicine is real, it is just an exaggeration. It only has some healing effects. My leg has been broken for so many years, so how could I regrow it? Moreover, the prosthesis is very good. The girl thought that what he said was also true, so she had to give up. At the same time, Dean came to another upscale community and reported to the robot guard for a visit. "Mr. Wong, please come in." Shortly after the guard robot reported, it seemed that it received a message from the other side. It showed a sweet smile to Dean. These guard robots were all female, but there was no distinction between men and women. Although they were female, their combat ability could crush ordinary people. Dean was relieved. The guard robot led him to a villa. After the guard robot reported, the door of the villa automatically opened. It was an intelligent automatic door. "Please," the guard robot said, and turned to leave after Dean entered the door. "No need to take off your shoes. Come and sit." A bald, middle-aged man was sitting on the sofa in the living room. There was a pile of toy mecha parts on the table in front of him. He looked up at Dean and was slightly startled. He didn't expect to see such a young man. The trace of hope in his eyes suddenly disappeared, and his expression became cold. "Are you a salesman?" Dean shook his head slightly and walked in front of him. He sat down on the sofa next to him and said, "I am the chairman of Dream Company. I know you don't have much patience. So to make a long story short, our company's new regenerative medicine has the same effect as the name. There is no exaggeration. As for the evidence, I can show it to you now." Chapter 1100. Wang Donglin endured for a moment, coldly said, "Evidence? What do you think? If you want me to take your regenerative medicine now, it is impossible. I'm not a lab rat. You think too much. Our medicine is very expensive. How can we give it to you for free?" Dean casually said, "Do you have a knife here?" Wang Donglin's eyebrows slightly moved. To be honest, if he didn't feel that he had spent a lot of time on this and would get the results soon, he would have driven Dean out. "Don't think about it. I'm not kidnapping you. I came in from the guard. If I kidnapped you, I would have been caught before I got out of the community," Dean said. Wang Donglin coldly snorted, "Wait, I will get it for you." After that, he got up and went to the kitchen to take out a fruit-cutting knife. This knife was extremely sharp and was made by a master. It was artificially forged and not made by a machine. It was extremely expensive. Only a rich man like him would be willing to use it to cut fruits. Others would keep it as a collection. "Here." Wang Donglin handed the knife to Dean and looked at him coldly. He was not worried that Dean would kidnap him. He was a soldier in the Marines before he made his fortune. Even if Dean had a knife in his hand, he was confident that he could capture him. Dean took the knife and raised his other hand. Under Wang Donglin's gaze, he quickly cut his wrist with the knife. Blood oozed out of the wound. Wang Donglin was startled. He didn't expect Dean to hurt himself. He frowned. "What are you doing? Are you threatening me by hurting yourself? Even if you commit suicide here, I won't use fake medicine." "Shoo." Dean glanced at him and showed him the cut wrist. "Such a wound will heal in a minute. Take good care of it." Wang Donglin was startled. He looked down and saw that the wound on Dean's wrist was slowly stopping bleeding. It was healing at a speed visible to the naked eye. There was a trace of shock in his eyes. His eyes became incomparably dignified. A minute passed quickly, and the wound on Dean's wrist had healed. He reached out to wipe the blood on the surface, and the wound returned to its original state. Not even a scar was left. It was like magic. This is the residual effect of our regenerative medicine. Not only can it regenerate the severed limbs, but it will also greatly improve your body's healing ability and enhance various trace elements in the blood. To some extent, it can also delay aging. Dean casually said. Wang Donglin's pupil shrank as he looked at Dean's white wrist. After a moment of silence, he slowly said, "Can you guarantee that this medicine can regenerate the severed limbs? I mean the limbs that have already scarred." "Of course, otherwise, why would it be called regenerative medicine?" Dean said. At the moment, Wang Donglin didn't feel that Dean's attitude was arrogant. Instead, he felt that it was a kind of arrogance. He nodded slightly, relaxed, and smiled. I have offended you before. I don't know how to call you. Chinamo. You can call me Chairman Chin. The corner of Wang Donglin's mouth twitched as he said, Mr. Chin, may I know the price of this medicine? I want to order one in advance. Dean said, the official sale will be in 10 days. As for the price, since I have found you, naturally you can afford it. Originally, our company limited each person to order one, but now it is the pre-sale stage. If Mr. Wang Donglin is interested, you can join the ranks of our company's VIPs. The limit will be increased to 5. That is to say, you can buy it for your relatives and friends, or buy it for your own sale. The price is up to you, but you can't break the market rules. Wang Donglin was startled. He immediately guessed Dean's intention and asked, how much does it cost to join the VIP group? Our company has developed a 5-star VIP system, but at present, only 1-star VIP is available. The annual fee is 1 million. Dean said, the price of a regenerative medicine is 2 million. According to the market rules, you can set your own price up or down by 30%. According to the limit of 5, you can still make money. Wang Donglin's eyes flashed. You are not an ordinary VIP, right? Why do you feel like an agent? That's roughly it. If you are willing, then cooperate. If you are not willing, then forget it. You can wait for 10 days to buy it. Dudian continued. Rejuvenation drug is the first drug launched by our company. We will continue to develop other new drugs. Our company has the support of top technology. You won't be disappointed if you join us. You should understand the value of this drug. Wang Donglin smiled. Well, I will join. Do you have contract? I have brought it. Dean took out a stack of contract from his bag and handed one to him. Wang Donglin's eyelids twitched as he saw Dean put another stack of contracts into his bag. He felt that his decision was correct. Although he had not heard of this company, but the evidence that Dean had given him made him take action. Although the price was a bit expensive, but it was not outrageous. In his opinion, it was still worth a try. After signing, you can transfer the money. Dean said. Wang Donglin laughed involuntarily. Don't worry, I trust you. Dean secretly curled his lips. A second ago, he was 1,000 miles away, and now he was talking and laughing. No wonder he could make so much money. Although Wang Donglin's words were pretty, he still read the contract carefully after picking it up. After making sure that there were no commercial traps or loopholes, he signed his name and recorded this scene with his communicator, just in case there was any evidence left in a lawsuit in the future. After signing, he logged into his account from the communicator and transferred an annual fee to the account provided by Dean. Dean received a notification on the communicator that there was a transfer of $1 million. Mr. Chin, wait a moment. I will make you a cup of tea. No, there is other business waiting for me. I will go first. Dean got up and left. Hearing his straightforward words, Wang Donglin smiled bitterly. After watching Dean's figure leave the house, he immediately used the communicator to search for Dream Company. Soon he found the company's information. When he saw the registration time, he could not help but stare. He felt that he was cheated. It turned out to be a company registered less than 3 days ago. It can't be a shell company, right? Wang Donglin's heart was beating like a drum. He had just paid a VIP annual fee. Although $1 million was not much for him, but whose money was not hard-earned money. Moreover, he would feel uncomfortable if he was cheated, even if it was just $1. Chapter 1101. After coming out of Wang Donglin's house, Dean went to another place by car. According to the information provided by Felix and the local rich people, he selected some of them who were in urgent need of regeneration medicine and personally came to sell them. Most of them refused to see him, but there were a lot of people like Wang Donglin who wanted to give it a try. After seeing Dean, they signed a contract and paid the VIP annual fee. They didn't realize that they were tied to the interests of Dream Company. The money given by Felix is barely enough to start the company and buy equipment. At the beginning of next month, we won't even be able to pay the wages of the employees. Dean went back to his rented house and took out the signed contract from his bag. He checked the balance of his account on the communicator. There was a total of $9 million. This was the annual fee for the 9 VIP customers. With 9 million in his account, his company could basically operate normally. However, if he wanted to buy more advanced equipment and quality materials, this amount of money was just a cup of water on a burning cart of firewood. Fortunately, after the regeneration medicine was developed, it would be enough to open up the market for the company after the trial and publicity of these VIP customers. He took a rest for the night. The next day, Dean came to the company and was busy in the laboratory. He personally experimented with the formula of the regeneration medicine. He felt that there was no problem. After he was busy for more than an hour, Ma Jing and the other two came to the company one after another. They were shocked when they saw Dean was already in the laboratory. It was only the second day of work, but they came later than the boss. The three of them were resentful. They immediately got to work and did not dare to be lazy. You have to work hard for the next few days. When the first batch of medicine is developed, the company will buy the machines to mass produce it. Dean encouraged the three. Yesterday, there were 9 big names who placed orders with our company. They have joined our company's VIP list. You should know them. Wang Donglin, Kurt, and the others. Orders have been placed? Ma Jing and the other two were surprised. The medicine hadn't been produced yet, but there were already customers? Boss, is that Wang Donglin from the Changjiang group? The well-built Zhao Fei asked in surprise. Duddy nodded. They're big customers. We have a large market for regenerative medicine. You should develop it as soon as possible. After getting his confirmation, the three of them looked at each other and were a little excited. Previously, they felt that this new company was a little unreliable, especially since the boss was so young. They felt that this new company was a little unreliable, especially since the boss was so young. They felt that he was some rich second-generation playboy, and he was also researching some regenerative medicine. They felt that it was a fantasy when they thought about it. They didn't expect that a big shot like Wang Donglin would actually place an order. As for Kurt, he was most likely the chairman of Pulia Pharmaceutical Company that they knew. After Dean left the laboratory, the three of them whispered for a moment and soon excitedly threw themselves into the experiment. After leaving the company, Dean went to the Science and Technology Park to pick better equipment. Among them was an instrument called TB Gamma Ray Piercing Lens. This instrument integrated the functions of a particle collider and, at the same time, could scan the tiniest matter from the hole without damaging the hole. It also came with intelligent recording and analysis functions. The effect was amazing, but the price was not cheap. The cheapest simple model had a price of 8 million, and it didn't include tax. However, this thing could be paid in installments. Duddy paid 3 million and then withdrew the money back to the company. He then bought several other equipment. In the blink of an eye, the 9 million in his hand was reduced to 1 million. He spent money like water. The equipment is ready. The only thing left is to go to the black market to buy an undead or go out of the city to catch one. Duddy thought about it and decided to spend money. It was easy for him to catch an undead, but it would be very difficult to bring it back to the city. When the equipment was transported back to the company, it was already afternoon. Ma Jing and the other two saw the equipment Duddy brought back, and their eyes widened. They recognized most of the equipment. All of them were outrageously expensive instruments. Only the top hospitals and research institutes had them, and in the hospital, only the rich were eligible to enjoy them. After all, if these things were damaged, the maintenance cost would not be low. However, Dadian explained that these equipment were not for them to use, and the three of them soon became depressed. When all the equipment was unpacked from the packaging, it was already evening. Time was as useless as money. Fortunately, the black market was still open at night. After dinner, Dadian went to an ordinary shopping mall in the North Desert City. He took the elevator to the top floor of the shopping mall. There were obviously fewer people here than below, and the clothes were extraordinary. Here, all the shops were famous brands. Duddy glanced around and saw a shop called Yanggu, which sold clothes. This was a famous brand in the Federation, and there were famous brand chain stores in all the cities of the Federation. Duddy walked over, and an elegant salesman immediately greeted him, showing a gentle smile. Although most of the coolies could be replaced by robots, but the top brand sales still maintain manual sales. This was also the difference between the top sales industry and ordinary stores in the Federation. "Hello, sir. Come in and have a look?" The salesman asked softly. Dudian nodded slightly, walked into the store, and asked, "Do you have a dark suit?" The salesman was slightly startled and shook his head. "Sir, this store does not have this brand of clothes." "Is it? I remembered wrong. It is a dark suit," Dudian said. The salesman deeply looked at him and whispered, "Yes, sir. This way, please." Then he took Dudian to the office behind the store and said to a middle-aged man sitting on the sofa who was playing with the communicator, "Director, this is going to the night world." The middle-aged man was surprised, looked up at Dudian, and said to the salesman, "Is it confirmed?" "Yes." "I see, sir. Please come with me." The middle-aged man got up and turned off the communicator, shook hands with Dudian, and took the initiative to go out. Dudian immediately felt that there was a very faint fragrance in the palm of his hand, which ordinary people couldn't smell. It should be some kind of mark. He didn't erase it, but turned to follow the middle-aged man and left the mall. The middle-aged man took Dudian to the parking lot outside the mall and asked him to get in the car. "Sir, you're a new face. Where did you know about the night world?" The middle-aged man asked after getting in the car. Dudian indifferently said, "An acquaintance." "I see." The middle-aged man nodded slightly and started the car. Dean leaned against the car and sat in a relaxed manner. He got the code and the address from Felix. He didn't expect that there would be such a dark place like the black market in the heavily guarded and monitored technology city. The more dazzling the light, the deeper the darkness. Chapter 11:02. The middle-aged man came to the front desk, took out a black card from his suit pocket, and handed it to the receptionist. One of the receptionists saw the black card, and her eyes flashed a trace of imperceptible fluctuations. She quickly took the black card, swiped it on the credit card machine next to the system, and then showed a sweet smile to the middle-aged man. "Sir, what room do you want?" "One," the middle-aged man said. The receptionist smiled. "Please come with me." She left the front desk, took the middle-aged man and Dean straight to the other side of the hotel lobby, and came to the front of an elevator in a remote corner. She swiped her work card on the elevator's scanning position, and the elevator door opened, taking the two people to walk in. Dean walked at the back, using his X-ray vision to glance at the hotel. He saw that the receptionist's work card was the same as other people's work card, but the inside was a black metal card, just like the middle-aged man's card. Below the elevator, 20 meters deep, was an underground square. There were many figures inside, bustling and lively. At this time, the elevator sank, and a sense of weightlessness came and soon stopped. When the elevator door opened again, there was a deep, dark passage in front of them. The middle-aged man took Dean to the passage, and outside the passage was a huge square. The middle-aged man did not take Dean directly to the square, but pushed open a door next to the passage and came to a small room. There was a huge host in the room, as well as a helmet and a storage cabinet next to it. The middle-aged man said to Dean, "Sir, you can place an order here if you want to buy anything. In addition, this is an anti-detection mask, which can protect your identity from detection." He took out a black clown mask from the cabinet and handed it to Dean. Dean asked, "What are they selling?" The middle-aged man glanced at him in surprise, but immediately felt relieved and said, "After Mr. becomes a star client in this city, you will have the right to enter the free trading market inside. Mr. can sell your personal belongings there, and you can also buy from others. The price is free, and it is tax-free. If you have a sum of black money that needs to be transferred to another account, you can also trade it there." Dean's eyes flashed. No wonder the black market could take root and survive. The benefit of tax exemption was enough to attract a large number of rich people. He asked, "How to become a star client?" "You will automatically become a star client if you spend more than 10 million yuan here." The middle-aged man smiled. Dean nodded. "I know. Sir, you've been in the black market for 2 hours this time. There's only 1 hour and 52 minutes left. I won't hold you up any longer. I'll wait for you outside. The middle-aged man said politely. Dean nodded slightly. The rules of the black market were very overbearing. All non-star customers could only stay inside for 2 hours a day. If they came to the black market twice in a row without spending, they would be disqualified. The black market actually opened in the downtown of the city. There should be a lot of powerful people behind it. Dean's eyes flashed. He sat down in front of the main computer and put on the helmet. Soon, a virtual picture appeared in front of his eyes. His whole body seemed to be standing in front of the picture. There was a dazzling list in the picture. Biological, science and technology, thermal weapons, cold weapons, chemical weapons, monsters. Dean glanced at the general classification above. He took the lead to click on the biological category. Suddenly, he saw some very clear pictures. The first one was a little girl with her hands shackled. She had big eyes, white skin, delicate like a porcelain doll. The price was 3 million federal coins. Dean glanced at the default ranking above. It was ranked by sales, but there was no sales figure shown. He looked at the introduction of the little girl, stubborn, pure, natural, asthenia, white virgin. Below the name of the commodity was a detailed selection, such as hair color selection, height selection, weight selection, age selection, degree of rebellion selection. In addition, there was a detailed introduction below. It turned out that the girl in the picture was a black market specialty. It was deeply loved by the rich. They could be bought as servants or playthings. It was like adopting a puppy. They could be trained or accompanied. If they killed them, they could contact the black market to be responsible for destroying the body. The second product below was a tiger cat. It looked like a cat and a tiger. It was a genetic combination. When it grew up, it was only the size of a puppy, but its appearance was inclined to that of a tiger cub. It was very cute and had a certain degree of aggression. However, it was trained to be a dog. It could also be used as a guard. It was almost a necessary status symbol in the home of the rich. Dean swept down and saw many other genetic combinations of animals. He lost interest and switched to the science and technology category to continue his tour. The first one in the science and technology category was actually a freezer. Dean's eyes widened slightly. It was incredible. He clicked on it and found that the freezer was different from his own. Although the effect was to freeze the living and let the living sleep, there was a risk of freezing. Moreover, the maximum time was only 80 years. Some people who suffered from terminal diseases could use the freezer to freeze themselves. They could wait for the future technology to be developed, and then they could be treated. Compared to my freezer, this one is too poor. The technology here is so advanced, but they haven't built a freezer that is better than my freezer. Dean felt a burst of pride in his heart. He didn't think too much about it. In addition to the freezer, Dean also saw many magical technology items. There was a mecha that could be controlled by the mind. He needed to wear the mind ring to operate. There was a spaceship that could fly into space. But the price was incredibly high. It was as high as 2 billion. This should be for the rich to go to space tourism. The Earth is too dangerous. It is safer to go to space tourism. Dean looked at the detailed introduction below. It mentioned space tourism. After a quick tour of dozens of products, Dean switched to the hot weapons category. He saw many destructive hot weapons. One of them was called Giant Thunder Cannon. Its effect was 10 times more terrifying than an intercontinental missile. It could strike a federal city from a long distance and destroy it. Such a weapon was absolutely a taboo weapon. It was banned from sale. However, it could be bought in the black market. It was estimated that it was sold to terrorists or some consortiums or rich people. They could have their own private forces. However, the price of this thing was outrageous. It was actually 8 billion. Those who could afford this thing were either top tycoons or consortiums. Monster category, virgin undead. Corpse period of 1 week. Body is still fresh. Chapter 1103. Using the virus extracted from the undead to infect humans and turn them into undead, and then sell them. The price is 8 million. Dean clicked on the details of Virgin Undead and saw the detailed classification that could be provided above. There were four major choices in terms of race: yellow-skinned East Asian race, white-skinned Caucasian race, black-skinned Negro race, and brown-skinned rare race. In addition, there was also a large area of choice in age. But the upper and lower limits were shocking, as low as a 3-year-old girl, as high as a 72-year-old woman. All had been trained vocal command control. Dean looked at the specific introduction and was surprised. The virgin undead here had actually been trained, and the method used was also the conditioned reflex method that he thought of. In addition, there were original ecological types, which referred to virgin undead that had not been trained. Moreover, the so-called virgin undead was the general name of the industry, which could be subdivided into virgin and non-virgin, such as an old woman whose age was up to 72 years old. It was almost impossible to be a virgin, but it also met the needs of a small number of people. The power is not strong, but the desire is endless. Dean quickly finished the tour. He could almost smell the bloody killing behind this industrial chain and the protection of the monstrous power. This was the collusion between officials and bandits, and it brought a lot of benefits. If he could sell one, it would be 8 million federal coins, and it was tax-free. If he could sell 10 or hundreds of them, it was enough to earn money that he could not spend in this life. Money always made people take risks and crazy. Dean took a deep breath and continued to look down. In addition to virgin undeads, there were ordinary undeads for sale. These undeads were captured from outside the city. Their bodies were rotten or incomplete. There were men and women, old and young. Their strength was assessed to have a total of 9 stars. But the highest level of undead sold here was only 4 stars. The following 5 stars were all gray and could not be selected. The price of the lowest 1-star undead was 200,000. Dean was relieved. He still had more than 1 million in hand. He could not afford to buy the virgin undead, but it was no problem to get an ordinary undead back to study. He immediately placed the order and paid. When the payment page ended, he returned to the list. He continued to browse. Other than the walking corpses, there were also many pictures of monsters. These pictures were taken from various angles, as if the monsters were arranged by the photographer. The prices range from tens of thousands of yuan to tens of millions of yuan. Among them, there was a 9-star monster corpse. It was 97% preserved and had almost no damage. It was priced at 820 million yuan. Dean got the detailed data from Felix and knew the corresponding data for each star. In the Empire, the magic marks warriors were from the initial hunter to the middle abyss. 9 stars corresponded to the middle abyss. The upper abyss was called the forbidden magic beast. As for the magic beasts at the level of the abyss, they were called the demon beast. Above the fiend celestial beasts were the rarest 5 great hell beasts. Every one of them had abilities that surpassed the fiend celestial beasts. Since the establishment of the Federation many years ago, only 5 of them had appeared, and they were all gone now. Destroying brain tissue with an electromagnetic nuclear weapon. Dean looked at the detailed introduction of the 9-star monster corpse. When he saw the method of killing it, he could not help but be surprised. What kind of weapon could kill a middle abyss monster unscathed? If this weapon was used in the war, wouldn't it be able to easily kill the middle abyss of the Empire? Thinking of this, he felt a chill in his heart. The strength of the Federation was more terrible than it looked on the surface. If they fought with the Empire, perhaps the Empire would not be their opponent. However, the Federation did not seem to be a monolithic block. He was going to ask Felix about the weapon after he left the black market. After a while, Dean saw many corpses of monsters. These monsters were sold on the black market, mainly to major consortia or some monster research institutes. 2 hours passed quickly. Dean exited the black market shopping list and heard the middle-aged man knock on the door. He took off his helmet and got up to open the door. "Sir, did you shop?" The middle-aged man asked very modestly and politely. Dean nodded. "I bought it." The middle-aged man smiled faintly and said, "I forgot to tell you earlier, sir. The address of your purchase will be kept a secret in the black market. We will disguise the delivery as something else so that you won't be suspicious. Moreover, We will make an appointment with you in advance. I know this. Dean filled in the address of the company. He had already asked Felix about these basic operations. The middle-aged man smiled and left the black market with Dean. I'm just looking around. You go back first. Dean did not take the middle-aged man's car after leaving the hotel. The middle-aged man did not mind. He nodded and left on his own. Dean walked on the side of the road and asked Felix through the communicator. Electromagnetic nuclear weapon to kill monsters? Felix was a little surprised, but his eyes suddenly lit up, and he said, That's right. How could I have forgotten about this before? Haha, Mr. Dean, with your strength, it's very easy for you to hunt magical beasts. I can lend you a mecha, and you can catch a few magical beasts a month, and that would be equivalent to half a year's sales of a large corporation. Dean rolled his eyes. I'm not asking you to give me ideas to make money. I'm asking what this thing is. Felix was stunned for a moment. He did not expect Dean to be unmoved. He could not help but frown and explain. This is a special weapon that can directly destroy the brain of the monster, but it is mainly aimed at those monsters with hard bodies and weak brain tissue. It is not suitable for all monsters. Moreover, this kind of thing attacks indiscriminately, so it is banned by the military. It is generally used to kill monsters. Once the wandering teams find traces of a large monster, they will investigate in advance and scan the monster's body structure. After the complete analysis, they will choose the corresponding weapon to capture it. This can minimize the damage to the monster's body. The less damage, the higher the value. For example, the monster corpses that Hosk uses to make mechas can't be damaged more than 90%. Otherwise, the price will be reduced by at least half. Dean slightly raised his eyebrows. So, the monsters are not a threat to you? Felix smiled and said, It's not that there's no threat. After years of war, the monsters have all been driven to the black domain outside the circle of peace. If a monster barges into the circle of peace alone, it's an act of suicide. But it's extremely difficult for our army to go deep into the black domain and catch all the monsters in one fell swoop, or drive them further away. There are too many monsters there. Although our weapons are powerful, but the resources are limited. Excessive fighting will consume the weapons. I heard from my father that a military expert analyzed that even if all the weapons and resources in the Federation are exhausted, we can only eliminate 1/3 of the monsters in the first continent. Therefore, as long as the monsters don't break into our peaceful zone, we won't launch a large-scale attack. After all, the demons are still eyeing us covetously outside. With the creativity and wisdom of humans, sooner or later, we will develop a new energy source. In the next few hundred years, we might be able to wipe out all the monsters and take back Earth, our home. Few hundred years, Dean murmured. He stopped and looked up. The street lights were colorful, and the night sky was hazy. Although there were no clouds, there were no stars or moon. It was not like the pure and dazzling night sky of the Empire. He shook his head, turned off the communicator, and walked along the street. Chapter 1104. The next day, an express delivery was sent to Dean's company. It was a three-dimensional metal box that looked like a freezer. It was tightly packed. Dean used his X-ray vision to scan it. He saw that there was a blonde male undead with a ferocious face and an incomplete body. Is it Mr. Cheen, M.O.? The one who sent the undead was a handsome robot. The chest was engraved with the logo of a large transportation group. It seemed to be just an ordinary transport robot. But Dean knew that it should be a special robot of the Black Network. After all, the latter had recorded his identity and address information. This was an important secret that the members of the Black Network were not willing to expose. It was impossible for the Black Network to easily give it to an ordinary company. It's me. Dean came forward to sign. The robot scanned the identity information in his communicator. After confirming, it put the things in front of the company's door. It said in a very friendly manner, Mr. Cheen, do you need me to help you open it and send it in? Yes. Dean nodded. There was no handling robot in the company for the time being. If he brought this big guy to the company, it would most likely scare Ma Jing and the others to death. The handsome robot immediately carried the metal cabinet that stored the undead and followed Dean into the company. They came to Dean's exclusive office and put down the things in the designated position. "Mr. Cheen, do you have any other orders?" The robot smiled. "No, thank you." Dean sent the robot away. Then he used his X-ray vision to look at the undead in the metal cabinet. From the bone density and the degree of body mutation, it was only at the level of a primary hunter. Most of the bodies still retained the human appearance, but the decay and drying were not serious. Although it was not made by the Federation, it seemed that it was not the undead that mutated in the catastrophe 300 years ago. It may be caused by some travelers who went out of the Federation. There's a sponge inside. It is sound-absorbing and isolates all smells, including the air. Although the undead had not been trained, it was very quiet. It was mostly because the metal cabinet was isolated from the outside world. Even if it was shaken during the transportation, it behaved very well. It is not convenient to study this thing in the company. It seems that we have to find another place. Dean heard Ma Jing and the other two whispering about the production of regeneration medicine. Although the soundproofing material of the office was very good, but it was useless in front of his ultrasonic hearing. In case the undead wailed during the experiment, most of them would be aware of the abnormal sound. Dean was not in a hurry to open the metal cabinet. He jumped on the sofa and turned on the communicator to search for a suitable house. After searching for half an hour, he finally picked an abandoned graphene battery factory in the suburbs. The annual rent was 350,000 renminbi. The area was large, thousands of square meters. Moreover, it did not include the green space and parking lot in the factory. Dean didn't inspect it. He watched it through the video for a moment. He felt that it was suitable, so he placed the order. It had to be said that in the technology-based Federation, there were many things that were very convenient and convenient. Dean went to the second-hand car market and spent 30,000 renminbi to buy a minivan. After picking up the car, he drove to the company and asked the robot security outside the company to help carry the metal box to the car. Then he drove it to the abandoned battery factory. The battery factory was seriously polluted. Several nearby drainage ditches were full of black mucus and unrecognizable substances. Dean took a tour around the factory. Except for the poor environment, everything else was okay. It was quiet and sparsely populated. The nearest commercial street was 10 minutes' drive. There were almost no pedestrians on the road outside the factory. After putting the metal box away, Dean drove back to the company and hauled the equipment that he had purchased to study the undead. After a few trips, his driving skills were already completely proficient. The cars and road markings of the Federation were vastly different from those of the olden era. Fortunately, he could use the communicator to share his knowledge, and there were teaching videos inside. With his control and reaction speed, as well as his near-photographic memory, he would be able to learn everything after watching the tutorial twice. The latest progress of the demon attack. After hauling the equipment to the factory, Dean looked at the hottest news in the North Desert City. Although he was busy with the company's affairs in the past 2 days, he was always paying attention to Lucien's affairs. He saw that the news was good news. It was an official announcement that they had captured several demon accomplices. Dean's mouth slightly twitched when he saw the word only. He looked at the picture and saw a young man with a pockmarked face. His eyes were dull, and there was a hint of ruthlessness in them. This was the first accomplice that was captured. His name, identity, place of work, and address were listed. In addition, it was mentioned that this person believed in pantheon religion. Then there was the second picture. It was a middle-aged man with a very clean beard. His appearance was ordinary. There was a mole on the corner of his mouth. He was wearing a blue and white striped shirt. It was very simple. There was also a lot of information about him. Dean looked down. A total of 4 people were captured. They were called demon accomplices. In addition, there was a video of the demon attack. The person in the first picture was in the mall that Lucien had rushed into. The video was from the surveillance of the mall. The person in the emergency exit did not rush out along with the crowd. Instead, he struggled to run back to the mall. Some experts said that he was rushing back to save his accomplices. Dean's eyes narrowed. He found that his eyes directly penetrated through the communicator. He saw his wrist instead of the internal structure of the person in the video. He was startled for a moment. His X-ray ability couldn't see through the video and the picture. Even the thermal vision was lost. He thought for a moment and zoomed in on the video. He carefully stared at the picture. Every frame was slowly played in his eyes. His expression, Dean noticed that the expression of the person was very anxious and even a little frightened. But his body was constantly being pushed by the crowd towards the exit. The expression was very realistic. It didn't look like a disguise. It could be seen that he was really very anxious. In such a case, the power he showed seemed somewhat insignificant. It was still within the scope of the power of an ordinary person. Is he just an ordinary person? Dean's eyes flashed. There was a trace of seriousness in his eyes. He then looked at the evidence on the screens of the other three people. Two of them were also in the mall, and they were acting suspiciously. One was shouting loudly, and the other's chest was bulging abnormally. The last person was on the street, acting like a madman, kneeling on the ground and kowtowing nonstop. Lucien's appearance in the mall was completely unexpected. It's impossible for there to be 4 demons in the vicinity of this small mall. Even if they were secretly trained by other forces, it's impossible to release them without supervision. Dean suddenly thought of something and immediately contacted Felix through the communicator. "Have you seen the news of North Desert City?" Dean asked in a cold voice. "Wait a minute," Felix said, and then said a few words to the others over the communicator. After a while, he said to Dean, "I was in a meeting. Of course I have seen the news of North Desert City. This time of trouble is too big. I don't know how many pairs of eyes in the Federation are staring at it. Fortunately, they didn't find you. It seems that you are safe." Dean knew that he was safe the moment he saw the 4 demon accomplices. He was a bit surprised as to why the other party didn't find him, but he naturally wouldn't take the initiative to provoke trouble. He asked, "The 4 demon accomplices they caught should be scapegoats, right?" Felix was a bit surprised. "How do you know?" "Nonsense. How can there be so many demons near a small mall? According to this ratio, there are many demons in the entire North Desert City," Dean said. Chapter 1105. Dean quickly glanced at the resumes of the 4. He saw the problem. 3 of the 4 demon accomplices had one thing in common. They believed in 10,000 Gods sect. "What is this 10,000 Gods sect?" Dean asked Felix. Felix was surprised. "You know it so soon?" "It's a long story. The 10,000 Gods sect is the largest religion in the Federation. Their believers are spread across all levels of society. Several members of the Rockwell Consortium are believers of the 10,000 Gods sect." "Religion?" Dean slightly frowned as he thought of the Holy Church in Sylvia. It seemed that religious creeds could take root and multiply in any form of society, whether backward or advanced. Was it because humans were creatures that needed faith to survive? The demon attack in North Desert City caused a sensation. They didn't interrogate you. I guess they want to use this incident to make an example out of you. You are the main culprit. They want to attack the 10,000 Gods sect. This is what the presidents of the Federation have always wanted to do. When the faith reaches a certain level, then it becomes power. Felix said, "The 10,000 Gods sect has crossed the line." There was a trace of understanding in Dean's eyes. No wonder he wasn't arrested as a suspect. He didn't expect that the Federation's infighting would be so fierce. They could find an opportunity to fight against the 10,000 Gods sect. He thought for a moment and said, "From your tone, you don't seem to be a believer of the 10,000 Gods sect." Felix smiled proudly and said, "Of course, I don't believe in gods and ghosts. If there really are gods, why do you demons still exist? Can't gods destroy demons? If so, then how can they be called gods?" "It seems that your awareness is quite high," Dean said. Felix laughed. "I wouldn't have today's position if I didn't have this awareness. This time we caught several believers of the 10,000 Gods sect. I think they will take the opportunity to fight with the 10,000 Gods sect. We can take this opportunity to secretly make a fortune. How is your company? Do we have enough funds?" Dean heard a hint of ridicule in his voice. He guessed that the reason why he gave him 1 million was because he estimated that the money would be spent soon. Dean said, "The funds are sufficient. There will be a large amount of money when the company opens. Let's not talk about it for the time being. Look for the information about the church and send it to me." Felix was a little surprised, but then he laughed in his heart. "Stubborn duck, let's see how long your company can last. When the time comes, you'll still have to beg me." In the evening, Dean watched the news from North Desert City. He found that the news had shifted from the 4 demon accomplices to the Church of Gods. There was a severe attack on them. However, they didn't directly say that the followers of the Church of Gods were the accomplices of the demons. Instead, they said that some of the demon accomplices liked to disguise themselves as followers of the Church of Gods. It seemed that the federal government didn't want to completely tear the face of the Church of Gods. The core philosophy of the myriad deity sect was deeply rooted in the hearts of every citizen of the Federation. It said that all things had spirits, and that all things would give birth to gods, including pots, bowls, ladles, and other utensils. There was a pot god for pots, a bowl god for bowls, a road god for roads, an earth god, and so on. It was almost impossible for the federal government to completely overthrow this concept. After all, many high-level government officials even believed that all things had a god. Therefore, they were very smart to choose a roundabout way to discredit the Church of Gods. There was no problem with the Church of Gods, but the believers of the Church of Gods were a place of hiding filth. What a good move to frame them. Dean sighed in his heart. These people were good at playing politics, but they were good at shady people. This preemptive strike was enough to cause a heavy blow to the Church of Gods. However, he had inexplicably provided them with a knife to kill each other. If the 7 kings of the empire sneaked in and stirred up the storm, I don't think a single soldier would be needed to break the Federation's infighting. Dean shook his head. There was an inexplicable disappointment in his heart. He didn't pay any more attention to it. It was estimated that the Church of Gods would counterattack. In a short period of time, the news would become a bit lively, but it had nothing to do with him. After preparing the equipment, Dean came to a dilapidated office in the factory. He had transformed it into a simple laboratory. Although the house was simple, the equipment inside was expensive and high-end. Dean released the golden undead from the metal box. The undead's hands and feet were locked by the connected chains in the box. It roared at Dean. Dean didn't respond to its hideous body and face. He took a small scalpel and cut a piece of rotten flesh from its body. Then he used the equipment to test the composition and genes. Soon, the genes in the undead's flesh were tested. There was a big difference between the genes of humans. It didn't have the ability to divide. No wonder the wounds of the undead couldn't heal. However, although it couldn't divide, it could transform into other forms when it was stimulated by external forces. Dean felt that a new door was open in front of him. He was completely immersed in the experiment and forgot to eat and sleep. In the blink of an eye, it was the 7th day since the establishment of the company. Dean estimated that the production of the regenerative medicine should be almost finished. He drove to the company early in the morning. He found that Ma Jing and the other 2 were there. They were lying on their desks and sleeping. It seemed that they had spent the night in the company. Dean's eyes flashed. His line of sight quickly fell on an instrument in the regenerative medicine laboratory. There was a curved light green tube behind the instrument. There were 3 small bottles in front of the instrument. It seemed to be the regenerative medicine. Dean didn't suppress his footsteps. He walked into the company. Ma Jing and the other 2 who were lying on their desks were quickly awakened. They were surprised to see Dean's arrival. Ma Jing's sleepiness was swept away. She immediately stood up and excitedly said to Dean, "Boss, we succeeded. 6 days. It only took us 6 days to produce it." 3 bottles? Dean asked. "How do you know?" Ma Jing was stunned, but she didn't think about it. She excitedly said, "Yes, I will show you now." The effect of the regenerative medicine is too strong. Once the finished product is produced, it will definitely cause a sensation. Dean saw her run into the laboratory and took out the 3 small bottles. He asked, "How was the experiment?" Chapter 1106. Dean looked at the 3 small bottles in his hand. So, these 3 bottles of medicine only need to be tested on the human body to be able to be marketed on the market. Ma Jing nodded again and again. Although testing on the human body is the most troublesome and the most difficult hurdle, but we are confident. In that case, I'll go and recruit a few people to test the medicine. Prepare the test contract, Dean said. In fact, even if there was no test, he knew that there wouldn't be any big problems with the regenerative medicine in his hand. As long as they strictly follow the formula given by him, there would be a 100% success rate. Ma Jing and the other 2 were the pharmaceutical elites that he had recruited. They had participated in a lot of drug development and production. The possibility of mistakes was very small for them to follow the formula. So the 3 bottles of regenerative medicine in their hands were basically equivalent to finished products. However, there was a rule in the Federation that the drug must go through human testing and review before it could become a legal drug. Dean came to his office and used the communicator to open several recruitment websites. He posted the recruitment of testers. In order to save time, he gave a high salary of 10,000 yuan. Generally, testers would work for a long time from the first trial to the final product. If they were lucky, they could try 3 or 4 times. If they were unlucky, they could try more than 10 times or even lose their life. This also led to a relatively high salary for testers. Generally, it was about 8,000 to 20,000 yuan. In contrast, the remuneration given by Dean was not bad. After the recruitment was posted, Dean contacted the customer service of the website and transferred 20,000 yuan to them. He asked them to help put the recruitment on the homepage. Half an hour later, someone contacted him. I want to apply for a job as a tester. There was a stuttering and timid voice on the other side of the phone, but it seemed to be the voice of a middle-aged man. Dean asked, "Have you seen the recruitment notice? Do you agree with our conditions?" I agree, the man hurriedly said. Dean said, "Then come to our company tomorrow." Well, is it true that the remuneration will be paid on the same day?" The man carefully asked. Dean said, "It's true. Come to test the medicine tomorrow and pay the money tomorrow." Really? That's great. Thank you. That person hurriedly expressed his gratitude, somewhat excited. Dean didn't say anything more. He hung up the communication and sighed. Although he didn't see the person, but he could feel that the person was most likely a low-level civilian who was forced by life. After all, being a drug tester was a dangerous profession. It could not even be called a profession. Usually, only those who were short of money or had contracted some kind of disease and had no money to treat it would become a drug tester. The price they had to pay was that even though they might be able to temporarily alleviate their urgent needs, they would still be tormented by the injuries caused by the drug tester for the rest of their lives. They would be in pain for the rest of their lives, and they might even commit suicide out of depression. It didn't take long for Dean's communicator to ring. It was another job seeker. Dean frowned slightly. He felt that he needed a secretary. It would take too much time to open a company. He didn't want to spend all his energy on it. Soon, he posted a secretary recruitment on the website again. This time, he did not give money to the website to help with the recommendation. Being a secretary was a popular occupation. Rather than giving money to the website, he might as well add it to the salary of the secretary. The next day, Dean took Ma Jing and the other 2 to the company to receive the drug testers. Yesterday, a total of 17 people called him. After 10 o'clock in the evening, the website's recommendation was removed, and no one continued to call him. Generally, the drug testers must have more than 3 people, and all of them must be qualified to pass the review. He only kept the first 3 people and rejected all the others. After all, in his eyes, the drug itself was a finished product and the price was expensive. Not to mention that he gave them a sky-high price drug. He also gave them money. Such a good thing may not happen in the entire Federation. Let me see your injuries. In the office, Dean, Ma Jing, and the other 2 sat on one side, and the other 3 candidates sat on the other side. 2 of them looked uncomfortable, and the other middle-aged man looked very calm. At a glance, Dean found that the middle-aged man's temperament was somewhat tough, different from ordinary people. He had a kind of military spirit, but also a bit of luxury. Such a person should not be doing this for money. Dean had observed the bodies of the 3 people when they arrived. At this moment, he was just walking, so as not to make Ma Jing and the other 2 suspicious. This is my injury. The middle-aged man on the far left was nervous and stuttered. He raised his left hand and saw that a finger was missing. It was wrapped in gauze, and there was blood. Even Ma Jing and the other 2 could see that it was an injury from yesterday. Your finger, did you break it yesterday? Ma Jing couldn't help but ask. The middle-aged man was nervous and uneasy. I accidentally broke it yesterday morning. I heard that you're studying regenerative medicine. Should I meet your recruitment requirements? Ma Jing suddenly understood and said with a smile, in that case, your luck is really good. Our medicine basically has no defects. If nothing goes wrong, your finger will grow back, and you can also get 10,000 yuan for the trial fee. The middle-aged man's eyes lit up when he heard 10,000 yuan. His heartbeat accelerated a few beats. Dean could see at a glance that his fingers were broken at night, which was not long after the call with him ended. The purpose was probably for the 10,000 yuan. 10,000 yuan for a finger should be a good deal for the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man with thick eyebrows and big eyes, who was sitting in the middle, glanced at the man on the left. There was a hint of mockery in his eyes, but he didn't say anything. Instead, he lifted up his shirt and took it off, revealing his sturdy chest. However, there were several deep scars on his chest. Below the scars, there was a pit, and there was actually a piece of flesh missing. Money is not a problem. Can your regenerative medicine cure my injury? It is already scabbed. The middle-aged man said. Ma Jing and the other 2 screamed out in fear as they saw the middle-aged man's body. No problem, Dean calmly said. The middle-aged man looked at him. Are you the boss? What's your name? Dean slightly frowned. You are here to test the medicine, not to test the boss. The middle-aged man was stunned for a moment before he chuckled and said, Well said. I hope your medicine works. Otherwise, I will be very disappointed. Ma Jing and the other 2 could see that the middle-aged man's identity wasn't ordinary, but his tone made them uncomfortable. Ma Jing curled her lips. Our medicine is certainly useful. You're taking advantage of us. Otherwise, you may not be able to afford it when our medicine is on the market. Chapter 1107. Ma Jing was so angry that she wanted to hit the table, but she suddenly remembered that Dean was next to her. She immediately suppressed her anger and checked the identity of the last tester. Then she took them to the laboratory for a physical examination. After the examination, all 3 of them met the requirements of the testers they recruited. Healthy, no other diseases, and body defects. This is the regenerative medicine. Now I will inject it into you. Ma Jing took out 3 developed regenerative medicine. Dean was watching her. She looked slightly dignified and nervous. She took a deep breath and took out 3 syringes. She inhaled the regenerative medicine into the syringes. Then she came to the slightly timid middle-aged man and said, Relax your body. Don't be nervous. I'm not nervous. The middle-aged man stuttered. His face turned red. Ma Jing was speechless. She was too lazy to persuade him again. She injected the regenerative medicine into his arm. For a time, everyone's eyes were focused on the middle-aged man. Ma Jing didn't continue to inject the second person. If the first person failed, then there was no need to continue to inject harm to others. How do you feel? Ma Jing and the middle-aged man stared at each other for 2 minutes. She finally couldn't help but ask. The middle-aged man scratched his head. It seems that my body is a bit hot. Do you feel uncomfortable? Ma Jing asked. No. The middle-aged man suddenly looked nervous. Ma Jing immediately winked at the other 2. They came forward to draw the blood of the middle-aged man and took it to the side for testing. The middle-aged man suddenly exclaimed when they went to test, It's itchy. The middle-aged man hurriedly tore off the bandage. The wound was really new and hadn't healed yet. The sticky gauze tore the skin and a lot of blood flowed out. The middle-aged man didn't seem to feel the pain. He wanted to reach out and scratch. Ma Jing was shocked. She quickly grabbed his hand. Don't move. It will be infected. But it's itchy. The middle-aged man was a little impatient. Ma Jing stared at him. Even if it's itchy, you have to endure it. The middle-aged man's face was deathly pale. He clenched his teeth. In less than half a minute, the blood on his finger suddenly stopped flowing. Then, in front of everyone's shocked eyes, the scar on the finger slowly protruded and grew at a speed visible to the naked eye. After 4 or 5 minutes, a pink finger gradually took shape. During this process, the laboratory was silent, and someone suddenly let out a sharp gasp, breaking the silence. It can actually regenerate. This medicinal effect is too strong. We did it. Ma Jing and the other two stared blankly at this scene. The effect of the drug was beyond their expectations. Although they had seen similar scenes on mice, they were mice after all. Who would have thought that the effect would be so terrifying when used on humans? Dean was relieved when he saw this scene. Although he was full of confidence, after all, it was not confirmed. There was always a possibility of an accident. What's wrong? Can you feel your fingers? Can you move them? After the shock, Ma Jing quickly reacted. Her eyes were full of fanaticism as she stared at the middle-aged man. It seemed that she wanted to dig out all the feelings and thoughts in his mind at this moment. It was the first time for the middle-aged man to be looked at so passionately by a woman. He immediately felt nervous and inexplicable restlessness. His heartbeat quickened as he mumbled, "It's a little itchy, but I can move around." After saying that, he bent his finger and felt that it was no different from his previous fingers. What's more, this finger was more sensitive and could feel the weak airflow and temperature in the air. Ma Jing was more excited as she looked at the middle-aged man's fingers. She looked at Dean and said in a trembling voice, "Boss, we really succeeded. We have created a regenerative medicine. We will change the entire Federation's pharmaceutical industry." Dean was very calm as he knew that she was excited. He said, "Let's test the remaining 2 first. Don't be too happy." Ma Jing recovered and nodded. She wanted to say that even if the other 2 failed, as long as one succeeded, it would be enough to prove that the regenerative medicine was feasible. It was just a lack of time to perfect it. It's really possible. The middle-aged man's pupils shrank as he saw the scene. His eyes flashed with a trace of enthusiasm. He couldn't wait to raise his arm as Ma Jing picked up the syringe and came to him. Ma Jing didn't like him. She snorted as she saw his reaction, but she still injected him seriously. The robust middle-aged man looked down at the scar and the missing pit on his chest. His eyes were filled with excitement and nervousness. Although the others had succeeded, his injury had been there for too long. It had already scabbed. Who knew if it would regenerate? Moreover, everyone's physique was different. That's why the regulations required more than 3 testers to pass the test in order to be approved for the market. 5 minutes passed. Ma Jing's face slightly changed as she saw that there was no change in his body. "What's wrong? Do you feel anything?" The middle-aged man's face turned slightly ugly. "My whole body is hot and the wounds are a bit itchy." Ma Jing was relieved. It should be the same as his situation. There should be an effect soon. You have more injuries and it will take a while. When the middle-aged man heard what she said, he secretly prayed in his heart. After 2 or 3 minutes, the middle-aged man gritted his teeth and growled. Ma Jing was shocked as she took a few steps back. "What's wrong with you?" "It's itchy," the middle-aged man growled. Dean, who was standing next to the middle-aged man, stepped forward with a scalpel in his hand. He quickly cut the scars on the middle-aged man's body. Blood overflowed from the scars, but the bleeding soon stopped. Then the scars quickly healed. The scars were stained with blood and seemed to wither. Soon, new flesh grew onto the scars. In addition, the pit in the abdomen of the middle-aged man slowly filled up. It didn't take long for tender flesh to grow out. It's a success. The middle-aged man's eyes widened as his body trembled with excitement. Ma Jing and the others were relieved and couldn't help but cheer out loud. After the sturdy middle-aged man's body had completely recovered, Ma Jing injected the 3rd person. Soon, the medicine took effect again, and the 3rd person's broken arm grew back. The whole process took about half an hour, and as soon as the arm grew back, the man shouted that he was hungry and then fainted. We did it! Ma Jing and the others couldn't hold back anymore. They hugged each other in excitement. As medical professionals, they naturally knew what regenerative medicine meant. They knew how terrifying the market was. Chapter 1108. Dean's reaction was very calm when Ma Jing and the other two were cheering excitedly. He knew that the real difficulty had just come. Although the rejuvenation drug was made by him, it was still unknown whether it would belong to him or not. It's really reborn. The middle-aged man sighed with emotion. He stretched out his hand and gently stroked the tender flesh of his abdomen. The touch was so clear and delicate that he could even feel the roughness of fingerprints. He was amazed by this magical drug. Then he thought of something. His eyes skipped over the cheering, excited Ma Jing and the other two and saw Dean's calm expression. Boss, you don't seem to be surprised. The middle-aged man was curious. He put away his contempt for the young man. He knew that the person who could make such a drug would soon shock the entire Federation. Ma Jing and the other two were surprised to see that Dean was not too excited. The surprise in their hearts faded a bit, and they calmed down. There is nothing to be surprised about. It's all expected. Dean casually said, since the test is completed, I will transfer the reward to your account. Please go back. If there is any need for the drug review in the future, maybe I will contact you again. I hope you can help. The somewhat cautious and timid middle-aged man and the third young man nodded again and again. They said some words of gratitude and got up to leave. You don't want to leave? Dean looked at the indifferent middle-aged man and slightly frowned. Few people will drive me away. The middle-aged man smiled and said, My name is Yao Jie. I am fortunate to meet you. May I know your name? My name is Qin Imo. Dean looked up and down at the man. He felt that his name was familiar. Soon he remembered that this name was mentioned in the news of the demon attack on the North Desert City. He was a famous general of the Federation, but he didn't know in detail. There was no photo of him in the news. Qin Imo? Yao Jie nodded slightly. Mr. Qin, you've cured my body. I can't repay your kindness. If Mr. Qin runs into any trouble in the future, you can look for me. I'll send you my contact number. Dean directly said, I have seen your name in the recent news of the demon attack. It seems that you are a general. I can see that your temperament is meticulous. You are sitting and standing upright. Are you the general? Ma Jing and the other two were shocked as they heard Yao Jie's words. They were stunned. Was this man a general? A general of the army was sitting in front of them. Yao Jie shook his head. I didn't expect Mr. Qin to recognize me despite being so low-key. I'm Yao Jie from the 3rd Division of the Federation. Hello, Mr. Qin. Hello. Duddy nodded. He was slightly speechless. Why would you expose your name if you want to be low-key? Ma Jing and the other two couldn't help but open their mouths wide when they saw him admit it. They didn't expect that such a big shot who could appear in the Federation news would appear in front of them. Ma Jing reacted the fastest and quickly said, General Yao, please forgive me if I offended you earlier. I was blind. Ma Jing saw that he didn't seem to care. She was relieved. General Yao, it's our blessing to be able to help you. General Yao, your injury should be caused by the monster. Ma Jing saw that he didn't seem to care. She was relieved. General Yao, it's our blessing to be able to help you. General Yao, your injury should be caused by the monster, right? I heard that the Armed Combat Department is mainly in charge of quelling the hidden threats of other races in the cities. Things like the infiltration of monsters into the cities or the recent attack by the demons are all handled by the Armed Combat Department. I heard that every member of the Armed Combat Department has extraordinary abilities and can fight 10 enemies at once. Is that true? Yao Jie heard her flattering words. He laughed. It's not as exaggerated as the rumors say. I don't have extraordinary abilities, but it's not difficult to fight against 10 people. Dean was a little surprised. He could see that Yao Jie's physique was that of an ordinary person, but he could fight against 10 people. Did he have extremely exquisite fighting skills? Yao Jie didn't pay attention to Ma Jing and the other two. He turned to look at Dean. He found that the young man's expression was still calm. He couldn't help but smile. Mr. Qin, looking at your age, You should have just graduated. At such a young age, you are able to develop the miracle of regenerative medicine. The younger generation will surpass us in time. Dean shook his head. I haven't graduated yet. I'm currently in school. That's even more powerful. Yao Jie exclaimed. It was the first time that Ma Jing and the other two knew about Dean. They couldn't help but look at him in astonishment. The big boss they followed was actually a student. Thinking of this, the three of them felt speechless and embarrassed. They had been struggling in society for so many years, but in the end, they ended up working for a student. All these years had been in vain. Mr. Qin, I have to remind you. Yao Jie's smile suddenly disappeared after he praised Dean. He said seriously, once your regenerative medicine comes out, it will definitely cause a big earthquake in the entire medical industry. Although it's a bit cruel, I have to tell you that there may be many people who want to buy the production rights of this medicine from you. They might even rob it. Moreover, it's likely that you will encounter trouble in the review. Hearing his words, Ma Jing and the other two were stunned. Their faces suddenly became a little ugly. They were all old foxes in the society, so they immediately thought of the stakes in it. Dean's face was surprised, then confused, and finally frowned. Yao Jie comforted him. I'll help you in the review. They won't embarrass you. How difficult? Dudian asked. Yao Jie smiled. He was still too young. The review information you submitted is enough to expose the importance of this regenerative medicine. It's likely to arouse some people's greed and let you fail the review. Even if you provide all the information you need, as long as the other party wants to find fault with you, they will be able to find it. They can delay your review time while they quickly copy the information and develop the same batch of regeneration medicine. Then, they will announce the birth of the medicine. At that time, they will be the rightful owner. In turn, they can sue you for theft. Moreover, plagiarizing research technology is a felony in the Federation. At least 10 years in prison. Ma Jing and the other two couldn't help but shiver when they heard this. 10 years in prison, a person would basically be ruined. Dean was like a young man who just came out of the society. He was angry and asked, if what you said is true, won't the same thing happen to other medicines? If that's the case, who would dare to study such an excellent medicine? Yao Jie shook his head and said, if it's an ordinary medicine, it's naturally not worth it for others to take this risk. However, the value of the medicine is too high, so there will definitely be people who are willing to take the risk. This isn't the first time something like this has happened. You've seen many famous medicines in the market, some sensational medicines, but behind them, how many bloody wars have you not seen? Moreover, it's very difficult for the Federation to manage this kind of thing. Unless you're a big group or have a deep background, it's not difficult for a small company like yours to take away your results. Dean angrily said, doesn't the Federation care about it? The result of this will only be the killing of geniuses and the killing of good medicine. This is caused by the environment. There is no way to change it. It's not something that can be changed by one or two people. Yao Jie shook his head slightly. He had seen too many such things. He was used to it. If Dean's medicine didn't cure his injury, he would be too lazy to remind him. Dean was silent. He didn't act at this moment. After a long silence, he said, I know. Thank you, General Yao. The people from the review department won't embarrass us. Yao Jie nodded slightly. But this is just the first hurdle. It is estimated that a big group will soon come to buy your company. If you don't want to take the risk, you can sell the company. If you want to struggle, you can find me. I will repay the kindness of your treatment. I will consider it, Dean said. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.